Chapter 881. Dragon's Sanctuary. The moment Luna's terror and desperation flooded through our bond, every rational thought fled my mind. There was no time for planning, no weighing of risks, no map in my head of the distance between us. Only a single imperative pounded through my chest. Reach her. Daddy! Stella's voice chased me as gray burst off my skin like a storm breaking out of clear sky. The power answered raw instinct, not finesse. It gathered in a choking pressure and then unspooled, thinning the world until distance felt like a rumor. I didn't answer, couldn't. The bond thrummed. Taut, golden, unignorable. And I locked onto it the way a drowning man locks onto air. The gray belonged only to me. No one else could pull at reality the way it let me. No one else could make the horizon fold and the ground forget how to be beneath a body. It scraped through me in hungry sheets as I forced it to obey. Arthur! Rose's alarm chased Stella's. A heartbeat late. Sound stretched into a filament and snapped. The chamber vanished. Wind became color. Color became heat. The continents beneath me smudged into horizontal strokes as if some impatient painter had dragged a brush across the earth. The gray rang metallic in my bones, demanding fuel, burning through it, and I fed it more without care for cost. I rode the bond like a rail, leaning forward into a speed that felt less like motion and more like deleting the space between 2 points. Mountains flattened into shadows. Rivers braided into silver wire. Cities became glimmering punctuation marks I skimmed past and forgot. Somewhere, the western continent fell behind, and the air shifted warmer, salt-tinged, telling me I'd crossed into the south. The bond tugged a hair to the left, then steadied, and the ancient presence I'd felt once before lifted its head in my memory. Tiamat. I tore through a last membrane in space. Too fast, too rough, and reality snapped back with an ugly thunderclap. The crystalline cavern accepted me like a thrown stone accepts the floor. I hit hard, momentum stealing my footing, boots screeching over living gemstone until I ground to a halt on the polished plain.
Luna.
My voice bounced off facets and returned thinner, higher, impatient with me. Arthur. Not the bright bell of a child. A deeper, steadier voice, musical but tempered. I looked up and my breath fumbled. The young woman approaching carried Luna's soul in her gaze, and that did more to steady me than any words. Amethyst hair spilled over her shoulders like a fall of liquid light, each strand catching the cavern's glow and throwing it back in iridescent pieces. Her eyes were gold, my old, familiar stars, set in a face that had lost its infant roundness for the clean lines of late adolescence. Luna? I asked, even as our bond pulsed yes, yes, yes through my ribs. I'm sorry, she said quickly, worry and embarrassment curling together in her tone. I didn't mean to frighten you. I was overwhelmed during training, and the emotions bled across the bond more than they should have. The loosened fist around my heart finally closed. I took her in properly, taller than before, frame slight but not fragile, a quiet force in how she held herself. The change wasn't cosmetic. Power breathed from her skin like warm air above a sunlit road. Your human form has changed, I said, relief flattening the edge in my voice. You look? I stopped before the word beautiful, heard myself, and didn't take it back. Strong. Growing stronger, said another voice, velvet over steel. Tiamat emerged from the deeper dark of her lair the way a meaning emerges from a sentence. Inevitable once it is seen. Midnight hair fell straight to her waist, framing a face that could have been carved to teach sculptors restraint. Her eyes, crimson, patient, and deeply amused, took me in with that particular kindness of hers that never let you forget it was balanced on the lip of something terrifying. Radiant dragon, I said, bowing even as I tried to pretend I hadn't just cratered her home with a poorly braked entrance. Forgive the dramatic approach. I felt Luna and chose immediacy over prudence, she finished, amusement flicking like a wingtip through her voice. I sensed you half a world away. Only you rend space in quite that fashion, Arthur Nightingale. Effective, if extravagant. I managed a rueful breath. The gray still prickled in the air around me, discharging in faint lines that crawled across stone. It did what I needed. I know, Luna said softly. She'd come close enough that the warmth of our bond layered with the warmth of her nearness. I should have shielded better. It was, she swallowed. It was the ceiling. My spine tightened. The memories? Tiamat's nod was crisp. Her strength is chained to her past, as yours is to your choices. To reclaim one, she must confront the other. Trauma does not evaporate because we wish it so. It must be looked at until it cannot look back. I can handle it, Luna said, the word steady but not stubborn. She didn't pretend it didn't hurt. She didn't pretend she wanted it. She only acknowledged it. That, more than anything, told me how far she'd come. Is it safe? The protective edge in me lifted its head regardless. If it pushes her into that kind of distress. It is necessary, Tiamat said, not unkindly. Safety is not the highest good. She trains in my care, and I will not let harm root where growth should. But I will not insulate her from pain that shapes her into herself. I let out a slow breath. The gray stilled enough that my skin stopped buzzing. I looked at Luna again, seeing not only the pain but what it had purchased. Presence, balance, a greater steadiness in the light I always felt from her. You do look beautiful, I said, the word fitting this time as a fact, not decoration. And stronger than ever. A flush warmed her cheeks, but she met my eyes with a poise only she could pull off. Thank you. Tiamat says when you reach mid-radiant rank, the seal will loosen more and I'll be able to wield pieces of what I was. Tiamat folded her arms, watching us as a teacher watches a lesson she has taught take hold. Your bond obeys principles of mutual enhancement. As Arthur advances, Luna remembers, and as she remembers, she can return power and clarity to him in forms that will matter. You amplify each other. A symbiosis, I said. The word felt right in my mouth. Yes, Tiamat said. Her gaze sharpened. Which brings us to a different necessity. The tone change nudged my attention into focus. I'm listening. How have you been training? She asked. Be precise. Technique, resource control, the pathways you outlined. Testing edge cases, then stabilizing them. Pushing capacity up without leaking too much. I paused. Sparring when I can. With whom? The question came mild and merciless. I hesitated. The answer had been tugging at me for weeks. Saying it out loud made it too solid to work around. No one. Not at the levels that matter. Tiamat inclined her head. There it is. You have reached a threshold where your ecosystem fails you. Your raw progress continues, but your combat learning curve has begun to flatten. Not because you lack will or insight, but because you lack stimuli equal to your present weight. Ava noticed. I forced a smile. It's hard to chase discomfort when everything around you breaks at your warm-up. Even saying it felt arrogant. It wasn't. It was simply the math of it. You are, at this moment, stronger than almost anyone on this planet, Tiamat said, not the least bit impressed by the claim she had just made for me. Even Lucifer, for all his talent and momentum, sits beneath your current ceiling. That should be pleasing. It is instead a problem. The words hit with more loneliness than pride. I had aimed at survival. Power had been a means. Standing this high on the mountain, the air thinned in ways no one warned you about. Without resistance, Tiamat continued, you cannot test your instincts. You cannot sharpen your reactions beyond the predictions you can already make. A dull knife looks like a good knife if it only ever cuts warm butter. So what do you propose? I asked, though the answer had already gathered, obvious as a storm on an open plain. The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile and not quite a baring of teeth. I am stronger than you, Arthur Nightingale. Luna straightened, excitement sparking through the bond like hail on water. She understood. My pulse steadied and then climbed. You want to spar, I said. I want you to attack me with everything you have, Tiamat corrected, and now the smile was there, bright and terrible. No courtesy, no hedging, no mental governor slowing your hand for fear of damage. The more honest your attempt to break me, the cleaner the information I can return to you. Here, I glanced around the cavern, the living crystal, the veins of light running like nerves through it, the impossible sense of age. Here, she said, this place was not made to be admired. It was made to endure. You will not get a second opportunity to strike at me like this soon. Do not waste it. I rolled my shoulders, forcing likelihoods to one side in my mind and stacking only certainties. The gray answered my breath, not yet surging, but rising, the way a tide rises over wet sand. It tasted of static and storm rain. I let it run along my arms, under my skin, into my bones, into the quiet black of my center. Won't I began and stopped. Old habits. The worry wasn't about damage now, it was about control. The gray could answer panic as easily as intention. I had arrived on panic. I could not fight on it. Tiamat must have read the pause. She reads 1,000 pauses 1,000 ways. You will not shatter anything that matters, she said. You will not hurt anyone you ought not. And if you fail to control yourself, I will control you for you. Comforting, I said dryly. True, she said, and somehow that was comforting. Luna's fingers brushed my wrist. The contact was light, but the bond pulsed, a steady drum. I looked at her, and she nodded once, a small, fierce thing. I nodded back. The protective urge in me didn't go away. It just folded into something more useful. Before we start, I asked, your training, how far? Far, she said simply. I can support more, hold longer, reach deeper. And I remember pieces, not everything, enough to anchor the rest when it comes. Tiamat added, she will be more help to you in this fight than she could have been a month ago. Consider that as you choose what to show me. Message received. No half measures.
No rehearsal moves.
Show my hand and let her show me the holes in it. I pulled in a slow breath. The gray condensed not around me, but into me, threads running from thought to muscle to bone to the shape the world took around my ideas. Space flexed, then settled. The earlier recklessness washed out of me and left a clean, bright edge. Inefficient, I said, almost to myself, thinking of my arrival. Yes. Tiamat's tone made the word neither praise nor censure. And now you will practice efficiency under pressure. I planted my feet on the crystal floor. It thrummed faintly under my soles as if the lair itself had a heartbeat. The vast chamber glittered, pillars like frozen lightning. Ridges of gemstone that caught the light and sifted it into rain across the far wall. The ceiling arching high enough that even an ancient dragon could unfurl without clipping a wing. If she wanted a place for me to be honest in, this was it. When do we start? I asked, and the gray's hum tightened, a string tuning to pitch. Tiamat's smile settled into something both maternal and predatory, a curve older than empires and as patient as tide. Power gathered around her without gust or glare, the way heat gathers above stone that has sat all day in the sun. Quiet, immense, undeniable. Now. Chapter 882. Dragon's Lesson 1. Arthur's azure eyes tracked Tiamat the way a swordsman checks ranges and angles. Then his lips curved. The glint in his gaze said he'd found what he expected. As expected. He couldn't read her exact rank, but he didn't need to. The weight of her presence put her near the same shelf as Alisara and his mother. Months ago, Alisara had shut him down in seconds during the banquet. Tiamat felt at least that strong and likely far beyond. How daring, Tiamat said, smiling, to try and measure me like blade length. Good. Then I don't have to hold back. He moved. Space tightened around his arm. Time thinned. Gravity tipped forward so nothing leaked to the floor. His punch was a blade. Sword unity wrapped from shoulder to knuckle. His sword's edge bound to his fist. The strike arrived as a needlepoint collapse of distance. Tiamat caught it. No boom. No crack. The force went into her palm and did not come back out. Get serious, she murmured, eyes narrowing a shade. The crown of twilight formed above Arthur's brow. A quiet ring of gray. The sign that Mythweaver, lucent harmony, soul resonance, and Sword Unity were moving as one. His breath leveled. His thoughts clicked into gear. Hollow Eclipse came down through Valeria, pure power. All elements braided tight, with Deep Dark as weight in the core, now sharpened with a thread of gray to keep the line clean. The cut fell like a horizon. Tiamat met it with a simple fist. The astral sheath of Hollow Eclipse unraveled on contact. The edge touched scale and found no purchase. All right, power alone won't do it. He slipped into Tempest dance technique. Wind cushioned his steps. Lightning primed his tendons. Water gave glide. Fire sharpened lines. Ice locked angles at the finish. Spectral sword painted afterblades around his real one. Shadows anchored to good angles so the mind had to respect them. He flowed into CQC. Arc hook spiral drew a guard by a hair. Ground reversal stomp twisted the local pull so his follow-up arrived from the wrong side. Phantom step knee appeared in a pocket people don't catalog as forward. Flicker palm reset inertia. The 1-inch punch snapped momentum through bone and steel as one. The 0-inch punch detonated that momentum without travel. A fingertip from Tiamat met his knuckles and turned the argument off like a switch. She's deciding the frame, not just meeting it. Not bad, Tiamat said. Her tone was teacher warm, not mocking. Show me your new language. He obliged. God flash. Pure speed and pure light. Cut frames out of the world. He didn't shout the name, he enacted it. Absolute refined it so every slice was a single correct answer. Singularity narrowed it to a single line. The sword whispered. Spectral sword laid believable futures over his real path. Lucent harmony filled the cuts with truth. Wind to carry, fire to eat resistance, water to slip around guards, lightning to force terminal speed, ice to hold the gain. Mythweaver wrote small notes at the edges. This claw passes where I was. This scale turns into an angle that favors my inside line. Tiamat breathed once. Not a beam, not a roar. Just a shift that told the room to stand firm. The God flash line, inevitable a second ago, found polite resistance. Arthur slid off it by choice, stitched along her shadow, and stabbed for the hinge a lesser dragon would raise late. She didn't raise it late. A wrist moved. His blade rang against an axis he hadn't known he'd made. He let the data teach him and adjusted. See more. Soul resonance answered. He didn't need to steal from Luna. He was bonded to her. Killinification rose like a remembered blessing. Soul vision opened at once, layering the world with intent and depth. Mythic body set his motion ideas into motion facts with less cost. Over it, he added dragonification, the permission he took from Tiamat herself. Horn shadow shimmered at his temples. A thin net of spectral scales slid under the skin. His senses stepped up a rung. Motion had weight. Sound had shape. Pond of tranquility touched the floor. The tip of his sword kissed crystal, and a calm circle spread. In that ring, incoming force lost bite. A tail sweep that would have folded a fortress turned to a heavy breeze at the edge of his coat. The pond did not last long. It did not have to. It bought him a breath of perfect balance. He spent it. Stellar cascade lit the sky of the lair with a barrage of cuts like falling stars. He placed them with God flash speed, not to overwhelm Tiamat, but to load the field, deny the best counters, force footwork choices, create one clean thread. Tiamat moved through the storm without hurry. A wrist here, a shoulder there, a step that canceled 3 threats at once. Better, she said. And now there was a thin line of respect in her voice. Arthur called help. Erebus stepped from the quiet corner of the world. The Lich King wore a crown of alien bone and robes that seemed to drink light. He lifted a scepter covered in old letters. Lord, he intoned, voice like dry parchment ripped slowly. The dead here are not to be touched, Arthur said, sliding under a claw and answering with a short hook to shift balance. Use memory. The necropolis of forbidden wisdom. Unity unfolded.
No corpses. No theft.
An ossuary of thought took shape. Rib pillars of bone script. Vaulted runes singing in low harmony. Choirs assembled. Skulls full of letters and music, jawbones clicking counterpoint. The Oblivion choir began the null cant. a song that lowered available ambient energy by a careful margin without defying the lair. Cenotaph engines, bone machines, spun up to convert waste motion into stored force he could call back. A phylactery meridian traced itself over Arthur's sternum, a symbolic organ to catch one fatal failure and hand it back as heat. Unity, Erebus said, approving his own evolution. Gray punctuation flickered at the domain's edges, binding it to Arthur's crown rather than fighting it. Tiamat watched the domain with interest. The lair did not reject it. It negotiated it down a hair. The nullcant stayed, just softer. Arthur pressed. Tempest Dance turned feet into runes on the floor. Spectral Sword stopped faking and started collating. Whichever afterimage Tiamat chose, the Real Edge met her there. CQC stitched inside the swordwork. The pawn's calm circle rose and fell on cue. For a brief window, he made her move rather than simply stand. She gave him that much and no more. A light backhand came through 2 times at once. Arthur inverted gravity near his shoulder, let the force slide along him, and fed it into a cenotaph engine. He answered with a 0-inch punch that hit a slice inside the touch. Scales met edge. A tiny red thread appeared on her wrist. Not a wound, a suggestion. Creative, Tiamat said, glancing at Erebus's city of bone and back to Arthur. Again, they traded 100 choices in a dozen seconds. Arthur's lungs stayed steady. His mind stayed quiet. He felt the limit of this line of attacks gathering. Power won't break her. Speed won't either. Then, something new. He let the crown hum. Gray stirred somewhere deeper than muscle or mana. It was time to try. Chapter 883. Dragon's Lesson 2. Arthur stood inside the pawn's fading calm. He drew in a steady breath and reached for the miracle he had rebuilt twice already. The wings of Eclipse unfolded. Once they were pure light, radiance that cut and healed together. Later, he had threaded deep dark through them so they could fold light as well as cast it. Now he changed the base material. Gray gathered, not as color, but as refusal to be color, and the wings bloomed from his back like 2 clean, flat planes of idea. They were not feathers. They were pages. They bent adjacency in a 6-meter arc and made far feel near. He flexed them. The world no longer demanded that point A be next to point B for him. He could step from one to the other if the page said they touched. 1 beat later, he surfaced at Tiamat's flank with a cut that started behind the thought of guard and ended at the scale itself. Lucent harmony filled the line with elemental truth. Mythweaver wrote the predicate. Sword unity made the idea into edge. The thin red thread on her wrist deepened by a shade. Good. Tiamat's eyebrows rose, just a fraction. On her, that was surprise. Well, she said soft. Hello, wings. Arthur pressed. The gray pages let him chain positions that shouldn't connect. Spectral Sword stopped being illusions, and instead became a menu of real Arthurs the eye could choose from. Whichever one you answered, his real edge greeted you there. Tempest Dance kept his feet exact. Stellar Cascade loaded the field again, this time from odd angles. God Flash threaded through the gaps with clean, bright speed. Hollow Eclipse dropped in as the hammer when the field handed him a nail. For the first time, Tiamat's stance changed with care. Luna breathed out at the edge of the cavern, eyes wide, hands tight at her chest. She didn't speak. The bond hummed steady and warm. Arthur marked the opening. The field was right. The drain would be heavy, but the line was clean. Now, he raised his sword. World's Edge came alive, the most powerful cut he owned, born of gray, meant to divide false from true. The ring of it formed thin and bright. It did not trap Tiamat. It framed a truth. Inside this line, the cut will reach. He brought it down. The cavern did not shatter. It learned. Light bled to the sides as if making room. The cut passed through Dragon Law, through Scale, through the small red thread he had already drawn, and halted a hair's breadth before it counted. Tiamat's right hand was there, palm up, relaxed. She had not blocked the edge. She had told the world very gently to hold. Arthur let the follow-through end without fighting it. He did not force the result. He did not have it to force. Tiamat looked at the gray wings, at the ring still fading from World's Edge, and then met his eyes. "You learn quickly," she said. "And now you will learn what stands in front of you." Her aura changed. It did not grow louder. It grew cleaner. The crystal ribs of the lair brightened as lines straightened. Constants stopped wobbling. Probabilities held still. The crown of twilight above Arthur's brow rang clearer, then steadied under a gentle weight. "She's using more power." It felt like 10 parts out of 100. No declaration. No drama. Just the world deciding to be exact. Arthur's gray wings trembled as their pages met a smoother surface than they were built for. They still worked. They just bit less deep. Mythweaver still wrote notes. The page beneath had turned from paper to glass. Tiamat moved. Arthur tried to meet her with God-flash speed. Absolute did not fail him, but his target no longer left gaps for Absolute to bite. Her knuckle kissed his sternum. His chest drank the death cleanly and handed it back as heat to his muscles. He rotated with the strike, snapped a 0-inch punch that unpacked a slice inside the breath. Found her scale a millimeter farther than the world had reported. Her tail drew a line in air. That line turned into the only safe place his left foot could land if he wanted to stay upright. He took it. He very much wanted to stay upright, and she was there, palm hovering a whisper from his cheek. His inner ear believed it had been struck. He corrected, laughing under his breath despite the ache blooming through his ribs. She let him ride the edge of options for 5 more exchanges. It was a kindness and a lesson. Then she closed the book. Her fingertip touched the empty air above his heart. The crown of twilight tuned in answer. His arts lined up: Spectral Sword, Tempest Dance, the CQC String, God Flash and its forms, Hollow Eclipse, Stellar Cascade, Pond of Tranquility, World's Edge, perfect, filed, available, and for one short moment entirely hers to read. Arthur set the tip of his blade to the floor. The pond rose fast, his best defense, a calm ring that erased incoming force. Tiamat stepped across the boundary as if it were a warm breeze. The lake did what it promised within its range. She simply did not give it a chance to matter. He tried to load another stellar cascade. She changed the ceiling on how much energy the room would hold for him, and the cascade shrank to a shower. He tried to force a hollow eclipse. She twined her wrist through his guard, and the power bled away before it formed. He flashed, pure light, clean and sharp, and met a closed door that had not been there a breath ago. He adjusted to hit the hinge instead and found the hinge had never been real. Her thumb rested gently on his sternum. "Enough," Tiamat said, soft and final. The gray above his brow rang once and settled. The Necropolis choir folded their song back into bone. The cenotaph engines spun down. Erebus inclined his head once, unreadable, then stepped back into the quiet corner. Arthur held her gaze and let his breath even out. His chest ached where the meridian had done its work. The small red thread on her wrist, his best cut, was still there, thin as hair. So that's 10%, he thought, not in despair, but with a smile that surprised even him. Good. That means I can grow into this. Tiamat's eyes flicked to his wings again. "Those," she said, nodding at the gray pages, "are good work. Surprising, even." He grinned, winced, and then grinned more. "Noted." Her smile tilted to something more predatory. "Again." Arthur rolled his shoulders. The crown of twilight hummed like a tuned blade. The wings of Eclipse flexed once, steady now even against the cleaner world she held around them. He set the tip of his sword down, let the pond bloom, and Tiamat's pupils narrowed the way a cat's do when the game turns to hunt. She moved. It wasn't louder than before. It was sharper. The moment between the pond's first ripple and its full set is a sliver most opponents never find. She stepped through that sliver as if it had been marked on the floor. Arthur reacted on reflex, God Flash press, a short stellar cascade to load the angles, Hollow Eclipse coiled as hammer, only to meet a palm that seemed to arrive from the breath after this one. Her knuckle kissed his jaw with perfect economy. His balance broke by a hair. A second touch like a soft drumbeat landed over his solar plexus. The phylactery meridian didn't trigger. Nothing fatal had been asked of it. His lungs forgot how to draw air for a heartbeat too long. He thought as the gray pages stuttered and folded, the world tilting to black at the edges. 10% really is. Everything went dark. He didn't hit the floor. Tiamat caught him under one arm, power snapping down to a whisper as fast as it had risen. The clean pressure in the lair eased. The constants let themselves wobble again. Too far, she murmured, chiding herself more than anyone else. I got excited. Luna was already there, eyes wide, hands hovering. Arthur. He's fine, Tiamat said, gentling his head with one hand. A warm pulse moved through her palm, smoothing the shock, knitting what the 2 taps had rattled loose. Non-lethal, but my combat mode is a bad habit. Luna swallowed, then nodded, trusting despite the fear in her eyes. Tiamat glanced at the faint red line on her wrist and huffed a soft laugh. He drew on me. That is not nothing.
Chapter 884. Lop Pilu.
Tiamat yawned, cat-like and unhurried, and stretched her arms until the delicate bones of her shoulders clicked. The lair's crystal lights caught in her midnight hair and ran along it like water. How intriguing, she thought, lips curving. She had not meant to push that hard. She knew exactly how much she'd allowed out, no more than a calm tenth of herself. Yet even that had been too much for the moment. The problem, if it could be called one, was simple. Arthur Nightingale was stronger than he had any right to be. In the last few months his edge had thickened and his timing had grown clean, the way steel sings when it has been tempered correctly. His fight with the second calamity. Gideon Ironmaw, the steel-devouring terror with the laughter like millstones, had carved away hesitation and left behind a ruthless sort of clarity. He's sitting at a bottleneck, Tiamat measured, eyes softening as she watched him. But not for long. Mid-radiant rank is close enough to smell. When he steps through, 10% won't be polite anymore. Arthur lay unconscious on a smooth shelf of living crystal, the crown of twilight a faint dusk glow above his brow. The gray had bled out of the air around him and gone quiet, leaving only the echo of what those new wings had done to distance. He would have bruises, not because she had hurt him, but because his body insisted on keeping score. She would mend those if Luna left any for her. Tiamat's gaze flicked to the Chelan girl. Woman now in this shape. The lines of her face had leapt forward a decade since she first arrived in the south. Luna sat with her legs folded to one side, Arthur's head resting on her lap. One hand cupped his jaw. The other spread a wash of pure light over his sternum in lazy, steady waves. Do you have to heal him like that? Tiamat asked, voice dry with amusement. Luna's shoulders twitched. She did not move the head from her thighs. This is optimal. Tiamat made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Optimal for circulation. And for feelings. Color rose in Luna's cheeks. The pure light did not falter. He is more comfortable like this, she said, trying for clinical and getting only halfway there. I thought you'd grown colder, Tiamat mused, still smiling. But you are still so soft. She lowered herself onto a low ridge nearby, stretching her legs out and leaning back on her palms. The lair hummed its approval of rest. In the quiet you could hear Arthur's breathing settle into a slow, reliable rhythm. As expected, she thought again, this time tasting the weight of it. As expected, he had surprised her. As expected, he had taken the hints she'd scattered months ago, found the doors, and made new ones where none existed. Those gray wings, pages of refusal, not feather or flame. World's edge, a clean ring of truth. The way he had let the pond of tranquility bloom without fear of admitting he needed a breath. The way his CQC had stopped being tricks and become lines. As expected, he had been more special than any Nightingale in history. She sighed, but it was a happy sound. The sound teachers make alone after a student breaks a limit. Arthur Nightingale, she said aloud. Not to wake him, but to set the name in the air as applause. The crystals echoed it back as a chime. Luna's fingers brushed Arthur's hair back from his brow. The motion was small, more reflex than decision. Her golden eyes were clear and focused, but there was a warmth in them that had not been there when she first walked into this lair in a child's shape. "Do you see Julius in him?" Tiamat asked, because it was a question that had been sitting behind her teeth for a long time. Luna's eyes dimmed at the name, like lamps turned down to protect fragile glass. Old pain shifted under her ribs, the kind that becomes part of your posture no matter how tall you learn to stand. "No," she said simply. "Arthur is not Julius." Tiamat nodded. The answer pleased her in the exact way she'd hoped it would. It did not erase the memory that rose at the name. Julius, the human boy who had strode into her lair without permission or plan, only purpose. A talented monster, yes, but also honest in a way that had cut straight through centuries of her careful distance. He had died young because the world is cruel and because some stories eaten by fate never get the third act they deserve. "You were rude," Tiamat told the memory softly, "and bright, and too brave." "History won't repeat," Luna said, half to herself. Her hand moved over Arthur's brow, pure light stitching sleep into something kinder than unconsciousness. "Not this time. You got closer to him than I thought you would," Tiamat said, reaching out to pat Luna's head with the easy affection of someone who had seen generations rise and fall and still made time for hair. It was not condescension. It was family. "I usually notice when you drift." "I didn't notice either," Luna replied, lips quirking at her own expense. "At first, I wanted something different. I did not want another one destined to be emperor of the world." "That was your own innate desire," Tiamat agreed. "Not anything I nudged. I am meddlesome, but not in that." Luna looked down at Arthur's face for a long breath. He looked younger asleep, which was untrue and also not a lie. Lines of worry evacuated in rest. The set of the jaw softened. The mouth forgot how to be brave. "I realize how much he means to me," she said, the words small and bare. "I have gone mad, haven't I?" "No," Tiamat shook her head. "Some people carry gravity. They bend paths just by being alive. That magnetism, that madness, that charisma, call it what you like. Julius had a measure of it. Arthur has more. Arthur is madder than Julius ever was," Luna said, not to diminish the dead but to be accurate about the living. "Arthur has suffered more despair than Julius ever did," Tiamat corrected gently. "So he is willing to do things Julius wasn't. There is a difference between madness and a decision to survive." She paused, then added, "And a decision to make sure others survive with you." Silence settled, pleasant rather than heavy. The lair's light shifted to a warmer hue, like late afternoon even though the lair did not acknowledge sun. The faint red line Arthur had drawn on Tiamat's wrist, his best cut, still lay there like a hair, pleased her more than it should have. "How were his last moments?" Luna asked. She did not have to say Julius's name. 1,000 years takes the need out of some sentences. Tiamat looked at the ceiling for a time that could not be measured by seconds. "Do I tell you the color of the light? The way his mouth refused to despair? The joke he made, terrible and perfect? The fact that I could have reached and did not because my limits used to be called rules?" "Luna," she said finally, voice a soft line. She did not add more. Luna nodded once and let it go. She had learned how to care without picking at scabs until they bled new blood. She returned her attention to the man on her lap, and the pure light deepened by a degree. Tiamat leaned forward, studying the glow. "You changed your weaving," she observed. "Less force, more breath. Good." Luna tipped her head. "He will wake with a headache if I push." The phylactery meridian absorbed the worst. The rest is only persuasion to sleep. Tiamat's mouth twitched. "Erebus is an excellent nuisance." "He has good instincts," Luna said. "He will be difficult when he decides to be. Undead kings usually are. They let quiet do the work for a while." Tiamat listened to the like-silk sound of Arthur's breath. She watched the dream muscle tick across his jaw as some phantom argument in his head reached a verdict and was shelved. She catalogued what to teach next. How to harden the pond without slowing entries. How to load Stellar Cascade without lighting every warning. How to keep the wings pages from wrinkling under clean domains. Be careful, Luna, she said after the silence had finished stretching. Not because he will break you, because you will break yourself in trying to carry too much of him. I have been careful for a long time, Luna answered. And this time there was a wryness in it that didn't belong to children. Being careful is my second worst habit. What is your first? Forgiving. Tiamat laughed, a bright sound that startled a few crystal facets into chiming. You picked a good man to practice on. I did not pick him, Luna said, eyes soft. We met and I belonged to him immediately. I am only now learning the shape of that belonging. Tiamat tilted her head. And if he chooses paths that salt your old scars? He already has. Luna's fingers traced Arthur's temple, not quite a caress. And I chose to stay. That is the point. Care is not a prize you win once. It is a daily trade. There she is, Tiamat thought, fondness washing through her like warm water. The little Qilin who used to argue semantics with storms. You know, she added lightly, because heavy things should not be allowed to breed unchecked. He is going to be impossible when he wakes and realizes you gave him a lap pillow. Luna's blush returned, fiercer. Again, this is optimal. For circulation. And comfort, Luna said, chin up. Tiamat held up both hands. I concede to the expert. They both watched Arthur for a while after that. Tiamat's mind drifted to the way his gray had felt when those wings opened. Not a color or a force, but a decision. It was a rare thing to see on a human so young, outside of disasters and saints. She thought, not for the first time, that the world had thrown him into a furnace and the boy had decided to be a blade and not slag. Do not do it again, she told the world mildly. You will ruin the temper. Arthur stirred. It was the kind of movement most people miss. The throat working, the fingers remembering how to be hands, the eyes testing light under closed lids. Luna's pure light thinned to a hush. She did not stop. She merely stepped out of its way. Tiamat sat forward, elbows on knees. Arthur's eyes opened, unfocused for a breath. Then finding the ceiling, the glow of the lair, the contours of Luna's hair spilling like amethyst over his shoulder. His brow furrowed in the considering way that meant his mind had woken before his body. He tried to sit up and made it halfway before Luna's hand on his chest asked him, kindly, to wait. He obeyed, which told Tiamat more about his condition than any spell. Easy, Luna said, voice low. You are safe. Arthur blinked, then looked at Tiamat. His mouth tried for a grin and managed it, even with the residue of blackout still fogging the edges. Did I lose a round? You lost the last 3 exchanges, Tiamat said, deadpan. But you won my attention, which is worth more. He let his head fall back to Luna's lap with an exaggerated sigh. Then I will count that as a draw. Of course you will, Tiamat thought and smiled. Chapter 885 Hope. I looked up at Luna's face as her golden eyes glowed faintly, healing light spilling over me. Her hands rested with a feather's gentleness against my chest and forehead. A lap pillow. That familiar, almost embarrassing softness brought back memories. I found myself smiling. Do you remember? I asked, my voice low. When we first bonded? Her gaze flickered down to me. The warmth in it softened, amusement mixing with affection. Of course. You gave me a lap pillow back then too, I said, grin tugging at my lips. Yes, she answered, lips curling upward. And you wondered who in the world had taught a Qilin about lap pillows. I did. I agreed immediately, chuckling. Well, nobody taught me, she said with a small shrug. I just saw it happen once. It looked comfortable, so I tried it. You were the first person I ever gave one to. Very bold for a first time, I said, grinning up at her. Her golden eyes met my azure ones without wavering. That calm, radiant look. It was the same look that had steadied me countless times. Luna was my anchor, my first ray of hope. The reason I hadn't collapsed when the weight of despair and darkness threatened to bury me whole. She was why I could even imagine standing against Lucifer, why I had clawed my way to radiant rank instead of rotting in despair. And yet, when I looked at her now, I realized it was mutual. "You've been an exceptional contractor, Nightingale," Luna whispered, closing her eyes as she patted my head, a small smile softening her refined features. "Meeting you was my own ray of hope, right? She was my hope. I was her hope. Both of us, bound together, fighting against the same inevitable tide. I had needed someone to give me strength to spit in the face of fate. She had needed a contractor who could break fate itself and not suffer the end Julius had. In the end, both of us had found what we were searching for. I'd forgotten how it felt," I said as I shifted in her lap, settling in more comfortably, her cheeks tinged pink. "Well, giving you a lap pillow when I looked 5 years old would have been weird," she pointed out. I barked out a laugh. "Weird, huh? I thought to you, human intimacy was just rabbits snuggling together." Luna's face flushed red instantly. She scratched at her cheek and averted her gaze. "That is not the case. Entirely." I blinked. My smile grew sly. My eyes narrowed. "Pervert Cheelin." Her face went scarlet. "Shut up and reach mid-radiant rank already," she snapped, pushing my face away with her palm. "Wait, don't," I began, but too late. I shifted slightly, one hand brushing her bare shoulder. At the same time, Valeria stirred from dormancy inside my body. A sharp surge of strength pulsed through me, uncontrolled. There was a blur of motion, a startled yelp, and suddenly Luna was sprawled on top of me. "Fuck," I thought, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. "Valeria." "Apologies, Master." Valeria's cool voice echoed telepathically. "I reactivated earlier than expected and accidentally boosted your strength." I blinked, then blinked again. Luna's weight pressed against me, her hair falling like a curtain of amethyst around my face. My brain stalled. What kind of romance fantasy situation is this? I thought flatly, staring at her. Her face was close, very close. "Arthur," Luna said, voice caught between fluster and warning. "Don't pull me in." "I won't," I said quickly, my arm instinctively circling her waist. "I'm just holding you." I grinned up at her despite myself. "Why? Were you planning to do something with a man who has 5 fiancés? The same fiancés you once told not to worry about." Her ethereal face turned redder than I'd ever seen it, as red as a tomato. Apparently, being 1,000-year-old Cheelin didn't make you immune to teasing. Before she could snap back, a cough echoed through the cavern. "Ahem. Would the two of you like to get a room? Or shall we resume training?" Both of us froze. Tiamat stood with her arms crossed, crimson eyes glinting like twin lanterns of amusement. Her smile was wide enough to reveal a trace of fong. Luna squeaked, an actual squeak, and shoved off my chest. But my arm didn't let go of her waist. Instead, she ended up even closer, our noses brushing. "Stay still a bit," I whispered as she squirmed. My arms tightened, hugging her against me. Her resistance faltered. Her breath warmed my collarbone. "Thank you for everything, Luna," I murmured. My voice came out rougher than I intended, because I meant it with all of me. She stilled. "You're my first friend," I said softly. "My first hope. The one I tell everything, the one who knows everything. The one who chose me. For that, I can never thank you enough." Luna's golden eyes softened. She leaned her head against my chest, listening to my heartbeat. "You too, Arthur. Thank you for being the best contractor I could have ever asked for." Our noses were almost touching. Her eyes closed as she whispered again. "Thank you." I whispered her name back. "Luna." And then we simply stayed like that. Her head rested against me. My arms held her. The bond between us hummed warm and steady, without words or magic, just presence. That presence stretched. A while became a long while. I could have held her there forever, until I realized she had stopped moving entirely. "Luna?" I asked, tilting my head down. No response. I checked her breathing. Soft, even, gentle. She had fallen asleep. "She was in the middle of training when you stormed in," Tiamat said from her perch, voice dry with fondness. Then she had to heal you. It drained more than she admits. She's exhausted. I let out a quiet sigh and carefully adjusted my grip. Where's her room? Tiamat pointed with a flicker of mana toward one of the arched crystalline corridors. There. Thank you, I said. I shifted, sliding my arms beneath Luna's knees and back. Then I rose smoothly, cradling her against me in a princess carry. Her head nestled against my shoulder, soft hair brushing my cheek. I turned to leave. Arthur, Tiamat's voice called after me. I paused, glancing back. Her crimson eyes were not amused now. They were steady, old, heavy. Don't hurt Luna. That child has suffered enough already. I nodded without hesitation. I won't. Good. Tiamat's gaze softened, though her tone stayed firm. The last thing I want is to see her sad. Remember that, boy. Yes, great guardian, I said. I continued down the crystalline hallway, Luna light in my arms despite the 1,000 years she carried. My steps were silent in the vast dragon lair. But her words stayed with me. Hurt Luna? Absurd. Luna was as important to me as my parents, my sister, Stella, and my fiancés. She was my family. She was my bond. She was my hope. I would never hurt her. Chapter 886. The Dream of 1,000 Years. I am dreaming. For others, dreams are mist. For me, they are doors. They open whether I wish it or not, and on the other side waits memory that has never cooled. He stands there first, as always, golden hair catching sun like a drawn blade, crimson eyes that do not ask permission from the world. Julius. When we met, he was still raw. Pride sat badly on him then, like a cloak he hadn't grown into, but the spine beneath it was real. I saw more than power, I saw conviction that did not bend. My lucent harmony poured into him, and in return his gift awakened fully. Empyrean order. He spoke, and reality listened. Not because it loved him, but because he made it inevitable. I remember the first imperial banner he raised, slate gray over a field of winter wheat. I remember the first city that opened its gates rather than watch its sons turn to ash. I remember the second city that did not open them, and the quiet after the gate fell, and the way Julius's jaw tightened before he told the soldiers to bury the dead with their names. The central continent was a quarrel of crowns then. He made it a sentence. Kingdoms cursed him and then learned his laws. Nobles spat at his boots and then brought their children to swear fealty. The Slatemark Empire rose not on shouting, but on a steady drumbeat of done and done and done. He did not burn everything. He made everything arrange itself. Women gathered around that certainty like moths to a patient flame. I saw them all. A queen who laughed like thunder and learned to laugh softly. A priestess whose dawn prayers turned greedy men gentle for an hour each morning. A mage general who made her soldiers eat before she did. They loved him in different keys. Fierce, loyal, selfish, generous. He did not lie to any of them. He chose one to be empress, crowned her with hands that did not shake. She cried from joy and fear. I stood at the edge of the hall, and I was happy for him. Truly. His laughter in those days, it was golden too. Then the throne grew heavier, as all thrones do, and he walked farther and farther from me. My place is beside the one I bond with, not inside their court. I would have borne the distance. But he took me to the northern continent. The islands where stone is black and the water bites. The wind there smells like iron and night. He led me to a cliff where waves struck until they turned to smoke. His hair whipped and his eyes were dusk red, not command red. Luna, he said, and my name hurt. Live on. Without me. He did not beg. He did not explain. Empyrean order wrapped around me like a perfect seal, and my power curled inward at his decree. I felt the ground under my feet make a promise. Remain. I called his name and the wind took it. He left. I did not see him again. I did not even learn how he died, only felt it when the tether that was our bond was cut. The sea wore the edges of the island down. Winters chewed on the cliff. Summers stitched it back with grass. Years went by until the word year lost shape. 800 years later, The world tugged at me. A man's presence, iron will and bright hunger, reached my island like a bell through fog. Liam Kagu. He would become the first hero. I lifted my head. I could have let my bond form. Instead, I opened my Chilean eyes. Fate is light to me, and Liam's fate was clear as noon. He would burn himself to stop night from eating the world. He was a pyre already, still walking around in a man's skin. I closed my eyes. I had grown tired of watching the living become monuments. I let him pass. Time, what was left of it, moved again. A century and a half later, a newborn's cry carried farther than it had any right to. Lucifer windward. The world tipped a little to make room for him. Destiny sang the same song it had sung for Julius, emperor of the world. I listened to that note and felt an old ache. I told myself that, if the boy found me, I would serve again. Perhaps the ending would be kinder this time. Perhaps I would not be sealed and told to live on with nothing while my contractor died. I waited. Julius did not return to explain himself. The child grew into a youth whose shadow trained the sun to move slower. The continent began to speak his name as if it were a season. I waited. A different set of footsteps reached me first. Black hair. Eyes the color of clear sky after a terrible storm. Arthur Nightingale. He did not carry the hum of inevitability. He carried nothing. I opened my eyes to see fate on him and found mist. Blank. I looked again, harder, with all the old sharpness I had honed across 1,000 years of watching. Mist. A story unwritten where all I had ever known were lines already carved. I should have sent him away. I bonded instead. Curiosity. That is what I told myself later. I was curious. What does a future look like without the script? What does a contractor do when the road is not a road but a field of snow no one has crossed? I tied my light to him lightly at first, a ribbon, not a chain. And then I saw what he was willing to do. The first time he cut his mana core on purpose, I thought I had misunderstood. Humans break by accident. They do not break themselves. He sat alone in a little room, windows covered, lamp turned low. He had barred the door from the inside. His hands were steady. He did not speak. He guided his circulation wrong, just wrong enough, to tear the pathways he had spent months laying. I felt the rip like a gulp of ice water. The core shuddered. Stop, I wanted to say. You will not fix what you think you can fix. I reached and did not reach. My contract lets me speak. It does not let me make choices for the one I chose. He kept going. He broke the flow, then held it, then let it repair, not with rest but with pressure, like setting a bone and then making the bones lift a stone right away. It is a cruel way to teach the body. It is a crueler way to teach the soul. He did it twice. He did it 3 times. He breathed like a man trying to remember how to be a man, not a hurt animal. I tasted the reason in him, salt stung and iron thick. Desperation. Not the kind that begs. The kind that buys. If I do this now, I will live later. If I pay this pain, no one behind me will have to pay it. He did not think in poetry. He thought like a knife. Humans don't do this, I told the empty lamp. Humans do not bend themselves into better weapons on purpose and then say thank you to the whetstone. But he did. And the next day he moved cleaner. And the next week he lasted longer. And the next month the loop inside his mana was not a loop anymore. It was a spiral that ate distance. I watched him train in ways no one could dare imagine. Watched him speak gently to a child he called his daughter. Watched him look at the women who loved him and be honest. He did not glitter like Julius. He did not pull the sun closer like Lucifer. He walked forward and made ground behind him where none had been. He asked me questions that should have been simple. Does this feel cleaner? If I shift the cut half a breath earlier, will the consequence land here instead? He listened when I answered. He argued without contempt. He changed. Quickly. I have seen prodigies comb hair in front of mirrors for a year and call it growth. He did in a week what emperors take a decade to attempt. Curiosity did not live long. It turned into something else before I finished naming it. Hope, yes, but not the soft hope I once cupped in my hands when watching Julius sleep in a tent before he owned a palace. Not hope for a crown. Hope for a different ending. For a life I didn't have to hold at arm's length because destiny had already signed it. The dream slides. Dreams always do. I am back on the island. It is night. The rocks are black as spilled ink, and the sea keeps hitting them because hitting is what it knows. I am sealed and alone. Julius's back is a memory even in memory. I say his name until it no longer feels like my mouth's job to make that sound. Windward's cry reaches me across water and years. I listen. I do not move. Arthur's shadow steps across my threshold. He does not promise me an empire. He does not promise me a happy ending. He looks up at me and, this matters, he smiles like a man who has seen bad things and chosen to get kinder anyway, because the other choice made him sick. Luna, he calls me. He offers his hand. He does not take mine. We bond. Light touches light. His core flinches where he has cut it, old scar singing. I press harmony into the hurt and it drinks me like a thirsty thing. He thanks me out loud. Then he asks what he should stop doing to make the healing take. I tell him. He stops. I watch him fight gods he has no business touching yet. I watch him lose and learn and walk back into the lesson before the bruise has cooled. I watch him look at fate and refuse to bow because it does not know his name. I watch him hold a child and hold a sword and not confuse the two. Lucifer glows far away like a star people plan their calendars around. Julius laughs from the past. Liam's pyre burns and will always burn, even after his body is ash. 1,000 years is a long time to collect lights. Arthur is not a star. He is a lantern in a storm. Close enough to warm your hands, steady enough to walk by, hard enough to keep rain from drowning the flame. You were curious, I tell myself, then shocked, then safe, then chosen. Not chosen by him, that happened too, but later. Chosen by me. I chose this ending over the ones I understood. The dream begins to separate along old seams. The island fades. The throne room folds. The little room with the lamp remains a moment longer. I see Arthur's hands again. Steady, cruel to himself, gentle to everyone else. I hold those hands in my own for a breath that does not belong to time. Heat at my cheek. Breath against my hair. The scent of steel and soap and something like rain-soaked cedar. I am not on the island. I am not in a hall. I am not alone. I am curled in a softness I once called weird when my face was 5 and my heart was older than mountains. Arthur, I think, and the name is not a wound. It is a key. My eyes open to dim crystal light and a blanket pulled to my shoulder. I listen. His footsteps are not in the room. But the air keeps his shape the way a lake keeps a boat's path for a while after it passes. I smile into the pillow he carried me to. The door is closed. The world is not. Chapter 887. Ignorance isn't bliss. 1. Tiamat's fist slams into my stomach hard enough to make the air scream. Valeria's liquid armor shell stress fractures in a spiderweb burst across my abdomen. Erebus's shadow wedge fails with a dry crack, and my own shield folds like wet paper. Heat detonates through my ribs. My spine bends. The floor rushes up. I hit Crystal on my knees. One hand clamped over my gut, breath sawn short. Consciousness slips like sand between spread fingers. That hurt, I manage. Because if I don't say something I might groan instead. Did you have to punch me that hard? If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to take you out. Tiamat shrugs. As if we are discussing weather and not my organs. And how dare you, little swordsman, you swung a blade at my head. I used a fist. A fist you spent 3,000 years training, I mutter. Her crimson eyes cut sideways. I look away first. Golden light pools over me, warm as late sun on stone. Luna kneels at my side, hands steady, face tight with worry she's trying to hide. Pure light hums through muscle and bone. Pain steps back a half pace and pretends to be dignified. Arthur, she whispers, close enough that her hair brushes my cheek. Breathe slowly. Don't sit up yet. I'm fine. I lie, then wince as my ribs disagree. Reckless is the only thing that works, I tell myself. Pain is cheap. Weakness is expensive. She hears thoughts I don't say and squeezes my shoulder. You don't have to buy everything with blood. The healing passes like a tide. When she's done, the ache remains, but it's a reasonable ache, the kind you can stack more work on top of. I push to my feet while the glow still lingers. If I let myself enjoy it, I'll want another minute, then another, and Tiamat will give me neither. What's your plan when you finally claw into mid-radiant? Tiamat asks, folding her arms. No praise, no scorn, just appraisal. Wipe out the abyssal kin. The words come out hard and even. Saying them makes the air taste like iron. They're the obvious target, she says. You'll be welcome in half the south if you prune that rot. Then Order of the Fallen Flame, I add before she can bait me. If I can find them. They hide better than they rule, Tiamat says. A problem solved by better eyes. Luna's hands still, though the warmth remains. Hatred flickers in her golden eyes, old and bright. We'll find them, she says. We'll smoke them out of every hole. Jack first. I don't say his family name. I don't want to give him the dignity. Before he gets stronger. He keeps wriggling into the story like a nail in a shoe. And Rose? Tiamat asks. It isn't a test. It feels like she wants to hear me say it. She's strong enough to kill her mother now. I swallow. If she chooses that, she deserves the chance. Luna leans forward, forehead touching my temple, the smallest touch grounding the tallest plan. We'll kill Jack together, she says softly. And Arthur, Alara wasn't your fault. Bitterness chokes a laugh out of me. I still let him escape. You didn't let anything. Her voice sharpens. You were low immortal then. Evelyn stopped you herself. There was nothing you could have done. Right? I say, and stroke her hair because if I don't do something gentle I might break a knuckle on the floor. I was too weak. Her light strengthens, answering the resolve I'm pretending I've always had. Alara's face rises like a moon behind closed eyes. Brave, tired, kind. Pure souls die because corrupted ones make the world pay for their hunger. So I will make the hunger die. Jack will be nothing to you at mid-radiant, Tiamat says, casual as a cat after the bird is already under its paw. I look at her, and the tight knot that lives under my ribs twists. My mother, Tiamat, tightens. If they picked up a hand at the right time, Avalon would still stand. Leopold would still laugh like a drum. Alara would be arguing with me about mercy and I would be losing. They could have clipped Alisara's wings before the sky remembered her name. They didn't. They are not moving now. Why? To sharpen me? To make the blade that they think the world needs? How many lives have they fed to that whetstone? I still can't trust you, I say, voice low. It isn't a threat. It's a bruise. Tiamat's eyes don't harden. They soften, which makes it worse. Ignorance is bliss sometimes, Arthur. Ignorance is a well with a lid on it. I snap. Bliss is for people who like small skies. I want the truth. You may have the right to know, she says, quiet as snow. But I have the right to tell you when I decide to tell you. The words land like her fist. I swallow whatever rises behind my teeth. Not yet. I can't outrun that answer yet. I send short, clear messages to my family and to my fiancés where I am, why, how long. I don't make promises I can't keep. I say I love them because I do. Stella replies with 3 worried hearts and a bossy, "Daddy, be careful." I promise her I will. Luna peeks at the message and smiles like a sunrise no one else is awake to see. Training becomes days that look like each other until I stitch them with pain and progress so I can tell them apart. Mornings are footwork and framecraft. Afternoons are structured violence. Evenings are picking glass out of my body while Luna pours light into the cuts until I stop shaking. Nights are sleep without dreams, or dreams so loud I wake with my jaw clenched, and her hand finds mine under the blanket without comment. Tiamat does not waste time on theater. She teaches with pressure. When I stand wrong, she moves me a centimeter and then hits me where the old stance would have broken. When I angle my shoulder badly, she lets me get away with it once so I feel the luck, then punishes it twice so the lesson lives in bone. When I string too many beautiful ideas together, she steps into the sentence and deletes the conjunctions. Valeria adapts, learning when to be plate and when to be water, leaving my joints free without leaving me empty. Erebus learns this layer's edges and his own. The Nullcant sings softer here. Cenotaph engines take in less waste when the room is clean. The phylactery meridian buys me 3 stolen lives before the ledger says pay. We coordinate. We argue. We get better. Sometimes I make Tiamat move. Not often. Not much. Enough that her mouth tips a fraction. Once, just once, World's Edge draws a hair-thin red line on her wrist. She looks at it later when she thinks I'm not watching and smiles a grandmother's smile. Proud and private. Between rounds, Luna scolds me for training like a man with a death wish, then kisses the bruise she just closed with light, then calls me an idiot, then tells me she's proud. She holds my hand when my fingers tremble and says nothing so I don't have to choose between pride and relief. We practice breath together. 4 in, 6 out, until the heat leaves my eyes and the corners of the room stop trying to lean on me. Chapter 888. Ignorance Isn't Bliss, 2. At night, when the lair quiets and Tiamat walks the deeper halls like a patient tide, Luna and I sit with our backs to a warm crystal pillar and share the kind of quiet that has a pulse. Once, she puts my head in her lap again. Optimal, she says, with a chin tilt that dares me to tease. And I pretend to be asleep so she can brush hair from my eyes without getting embarrassed. On the 4th day, Tiamat throws a straight line. I'm there before the line arrives, not because I'm faster, but because I finally accept that she isn't hiding a trick in the simple ones. My parry is clean. My counter is cleaner. Hollow Eclipse rides the edge as a short, brutal truth instead of a speech. She taps it aside, but the floor under her foot admits it misjudged friction. She adjusts. I grin. She pretends not to see. On the 6th, she traps my blade with a wrist and a thought. I let go of the hilt instead of wrestling for it and turn the empty hand into a 0-inch punch with a slice packed inside. It doesn't scratch her chin, but it makes her tilt her head. Luna claps once, too loud, then clamps her hand over her mouth as if applause might offend a dragon. On the 7th, I overreach. I know it the instant before I do it, and I do it anyway because the body remembers old lies. Tiamat's response is light, barely a touch to my chest, and I fold around it like paper. The room reels. The phylactery meridian drinks the death before it can form and gives it back to my muscles as heat. I lie on the floor and stare at the ceiling and laugh at myself because the other choice is self-pity and I'm bored of that flavor. Idiot, Luna says, kneeling, voice full of love disguised as annoyance. You're idiot, I say, and she goes red precisely to the degree that makes my chest hurt in a way no light can fix. Tiamat watches all of this with the bland patience of mountains. Then, out of nowhere, what will you do when the last cult is ash? I blink sweat out of my eyes. Sleep. Liar. Eat. Closer. I look at Luna because I don't want to look at myself. Live, I say finally. With them. With her. With all of it. I don't say with the truth, because that fight is a different lesson, and the teacher I need for it is the one refusing to speak. Ignorance isn't bliss. I tell Luna later, when the lair is low light and our hands have found each other again. It's chains. I'll break every one. I'll kill Jack, burn his rot, tear up the roots, and then I'll find what Tiamat is hiding if I have to cut the sky open. She lays her head on my shoulder, weight gentle and absolute. Then I'll be beside you when you do. We don't kiss. We don't need to. The promise sits between us like a small, bright fire. Training keeps taking and giving. My footwork turns from clever to correct. Tempest dance loses flourishes and finds speed. Spectral sword stops being a magic trick I play on my own reflection and becomes a catalog of consequences I am finally quick enough to choose from. The CQC chain stops trying to be 6 different languages and starts being accents of the same voice. Arc hook spiral draws a shape that ground reversal stomp understands. Phantom step knee appears where flicker palm has made space. The 1-inch and 0-inch stop competing and simply arrive when asked. Luna adjusts the way she heals me. Less force, more breath. She lets the body fix what it can fix if it is told it is allowed to, and only fixes what it cannot. She lectures me on not using the meridian like a spare life I can spend on stupidity. I promise to listen. I break the promise the next day. She glares. I apologize. She forgives me because forgiveness is her first worst habit and caution is her second. You always pretend you're made of steel, she says, half asleep against my chest. But steel needs holding while it cools. I thought you said you learned lap pillows from watching rabbits. I murmur, because teasing her is a drug. Her ears go pink. Shut up. Valeria learns my pauses and starts waking a breath earlier so her armor arrives before the blow, not after. Erebus reduces the domain footprint so it slides into the lair's geometry without complaint. The choir sings low, the engines gulp fewer sparks and hold them longer. They are both proud when Tiamat has to shift a foot instead of a toe. I'm proud too. Between beatings I message home again. Stella sends a photo of a lopsided pancake and the words, "I made it, Daddy, it is terrible," and I nearly cry laughing in a dragon's house. I tell her it looks perfect and that perfection tastes like practice. Rose sends a blade emoji and a heart. Cecilia sends a page of notes on my stance from a video I didn't know someone took. Rachel sends drink water and a threat disguised as a smiley face. I drink water. I smile into the rim. On the 10th day, Tiamat stops mid-lesson, looks at my grip, and says, like a weather report, "You're ready to hit me for real." "I've been trying to hit you for real," I say, honest. "No," she says. "You've been trying not to disappoint me." She's right. It stings. I let the sting tell me where to put my weight. When the round starts, I don't try to be brilliant. I walk into her space with a single clean idea and I don't decorate it. She reaches to take the idea away. I let her, then take it back without arguing. The blade turns. Hollow eclipse comes down, not as a sermon but as a sentence. It doesn't cut her. It moves her coat. Luna claps once, quiet this time, and doesn't hide it. We stop when my vision tunnels and the ceiling starts pretending to tilt. Luna's hands glow. Tiamat folds her arms and pretends she isn't the tiniest bit pleased. I lean my head back against the warm crystal and let my eyes close as the pain steps back again. "I'll kill Jack," I say into the quiet. "I'll wipe the kin. I'll find the fallen. I'll pull their teeth out of the world. And then I'll pry the truth out of this place if I have to break my nails on the hinges." Luna's fingers thread through mine. "Then you'll sleep," she says. "Maybe," I say. "For a week. For a day," she says, because she knows me better than I do. Tiamat's footsteps recede. The lair breathes. My body stops remembering each blow individually and starts filing them as lessons instead of insults. I tilt my head and press my nose to Luna's hair. She doesn't move away. Her heartbeat answers mine like a metronome trusting the song. I don't trust Tiamat. Not yet. I don't forgive myself. Not yet. I don't know the truth. Not yet. But the distance between not yet and now feels smaller than it did when I walked in here, and that is the only currency I respect. Tomorrow she'll break me again. Tomorrow Luna will put me back together. Tomorrow I will stand up faster. Tomorrow I will draw a red thread half a hair deeper on the wrist of a dragon. I close my eyes. I don't fall asleep. I rest in the shape of someone who intends to. Chapter 889. A Dragon's Dilemma. Luna sleeps like rain after thunder. Spent light tucked into itself. Hair spilling like a dark violet stream across the pillow Arthur carried her to. He left the door half closed and walked away on quiet feet. Good. He knows what to guard. I sit on the central rise and listen to my lair breathe. The crystal sings when he moves. It hums a different tune when she heals. I have lived with these sounds long enough to tell mood from footstep, pride from pain. Today the lair sounds hopeful and tired at the same time. That is an Arthur sound. Not the first one. The first Arthur made Luna. Stitched to being the world had never seen from dragon marrow, basilisk nerve, and phoenix heartfire, then steadied the seams with his will until the world accepted it and wrote a new word for it. Qilin. Some would call that fake. I call it craft, and duty, and love shaped like a person. I looked at the bright child who didn't know how to be a person yet and decided I would be her grandmother. No one asked me. I didn't ask the world. I do not ask when the answer should be yes. This Arthur is not that Arthur. The soul wearing his bones is from another world. I can feel it in the way he argues with fate. The first one had already made a long, quiet deal with despair, and kept it. This one still fights the clerk who wrote the contract. He laughs more. He is kinder to himself and also harder on himself. He has not given up. I like that about him. He wants the next step, mid-radiant. He keeps reaching for it like a shelf just above his fingers. He can lift heavy things. He can run faster than most men can think. He can cut truth out of lies with his arts. But that step is not about more force. It is about how he stands in the breath before a thing happens. He still splits his pieces, sword here, speed there, mind here, heart there. He is learning to put them together. Not fast enough. I try the honest tools first. I always do. I make him drink water before and after. Humans skip the simple rescue and then complain when they drown in harder seas. I watch his foot set on the smooth crystal. Too much heel, I tell him, and then I tap that heel with my toe hard enough that he wobbles. So the lesson lands in bone and not just ear. I change the air so it stops catching him when he takes a wrong step. I change the room so the echoes he uses for timing are late. I show him the 3 places where his guard falls asleep when he breathes. He wakes them one by one, then forgets one, then finds it again with a curse and a grin. Valeria curls as liquid armor over his ribs, then unlocks into a blade in his hand when he needs a cut. She is quick, smart, and protective to a fault. Erebus sets out his city of bone script with tidy care, then turns his choir low because he has learned to respect other people's homes. Their work holds. I push through it anyway in low ways that do not break them, only show them where they bend. They do not sulk. They adjust in the next pass. Good companions. We spar the long way for days. I keep it simple so the simple things stop lying to him. He opens with God Flash. Pure speed and pure light, no shouting, just the world losing a frame and then finding it again with my wrist in the way. I meet it without blinking, not to insult him, but to make him stop leaning on speed like it is a crutch. He does not sulk. He threads speed into the next thing. He drops hollow eclipse like a hammer. It is power done right, no sugar, no show, a piece of night wrapped around a cut. I touch it with my fist and let the force fall into the floor. He feels the give and does not argue. He resets. He brings me another clean truth. Better. He loads stellar cascade. Star-like cuts falling in a pattern that herds my steps. He tries to herd me toward a mistake. I am a dragon. I do not need to pretend to be clever to avoid pens. But I let 2 stars land where they might matter to anyone else, then walk out of his pattern on a line he did not draw. He watches the walk. He steals the walk. The next time he sets a cascade, he leaves that line out. Much better. He plants Valeria's tip, breathes once, and sets the pond of tranquility. The calm ring eats my push like a lake eats a stone. I step across the edge and the pond does what it promises. Turns heavy into hush. So I do not give it a chance to matter. I change the timing. He feels the miss, shuts down the pond, and moves his feet instead. That is the lesson. He keeps the world's edge sheathed most days. Good. That one drinks him even when he wins. He knows it. He calls the gray wings he remade. Pages instead of feathers, refusal instead of shine, and they turn the room into shortcuts and near doors. He jumps across adjacency and arrives at my shoulder with a line that starts behind the idea of a guard and ends where scale would be. I move the scale a finger's width. He feels it and does not fight the miss. He chains into a knee, a palm, a short punch with a bite hidden inside. He is learning to let his body talk while his mind listens. I do not hold back my eyes. He deserves the full weight of being seen. When he strings for movements clean and quiet, I nod once. When he removes a flourish on his own, I say nothing, which is more. Between rounds he sits with Luna and drinks water like an obedient soldier. She feeds light into his ribs and scolds him for being made of pride instead of caution. He tries to argue. She wins by pouting. He loses by laughing. I watch them and feel a tug in my chest that has nothing to do with rank. If I were only a grandmother, I would take Luna's face in my hands and tell her every truth I own. But she is a Chelan born for duty. She serves the contractor she was made for. Her fate runs next to his like 2 rails. If I tell her all, I steal choices from her. I have done enough stealing in my long life. I am sorry, child. I tell her in the room where no one hears. I should give you cake and long stories and a lap to sleep on. I am giving you war instead. She calls me great guardian in public and grandmother with her eyes. I will answer to both. I will fail at both. I prefer the honest failure. Arthur keeps brushing that ceiling. I can hear it, the small, flat sound of a hand meeting a surface that refuses to let him through. He hates that sound. Good. Hate is a kind of fuel. I would rather he fed on hope, but a dragon does not judge the meal when he sees the road length. I try other doors. I sit him down and make him breathe until his shoulders drop. I tell him to hold Valeria in his hand and not swing at anything for 100 breaths. He fights himself harder than he fights me. He shakes. He wins. He learns to stop making noise inside his own skull when he needs silence. I set a rhythm in the lair, slow, then quick, then pause, then rush, and make him move only on the second beat. He hates it. He learns to love it. He stops jumping at the first drum. That saves a life later. I have him spar against his shadow while I watch. He tries to please me. I turn my back so he stops playing to the audience. He sighs and fights a cleaner fight. I hear it in the footfalls. Night comes and the lair quiets. I walk the halls where the first Arthur bled, and the place where Julius laughed, and the corner where Luna stood small and angry at the world for not being kinder. I touch the walls with my palm. The crystal warms my hand. I have taught many, but not all of them made me worry like this. This one is stubborn and brave and so tired of being told later. He makes me want to hurry and be gentle at the same time. Cannot do both. I think about asking someone else to push him. Lucifer would be a clean mirror. Alisara would be a dirty one. The idea makes my lip curl. No, I will not feed him to anyone else's lesson while he wears my roof. There is a last door. I know it works. I do not like it. I put my hand on the latch and take it away twice. I sit and watch Luna sleep again. Her light is dim and steady. She looks younger like this, which is a joke time plays on immortals. I want to wake her, tell her I will be awful in the morning, and ask her to forgive me in advance. I do not. She needs sleep more than I need absolution. Tomorrow, I think. Choose tomorrow. I drink water, open the lair's lungs so it breathes clean, and stand on the rise when the boy wakes. Now, I say when he looks at me. He nods. He does not smile. He does not ask what changed. He will learn it with his body. We begin as we began all week. Polite, honest, simple. He tries speed. I turn the speed into a miss without making him feel small. He tries power. I give it somewhere harmless to go. He tries shape. I walk out of the shape. He watches, steals, repeats. Good. I do not choose the last door yet. I watch his breath. Still shallow on the fourth exchange. Still trying to hurry the lesson to the finish. Slow. I think at him the way old birds think at fledglings. He doesn't hear it. He will. He sets the pond. I take one step into it, let it erase my shove, then leave. I see his eyes flick to Luna in the corner, question in them. He worries if the pond will fail her, too. I step closer on purpose so he has to stop thinking and start moving. He does. He moves better than yesterday. I let him touch my sleeve once. I do not let him land the second touch. He grins anyway, blood happy on his lip. He is a child and a man in the same skin. It makes me want to be kind. I will be kind later, not today. He bows at the end without being told. Respect is not posture with him. It lives in his bones. I am proud and annoyed in equal measure. I dismiss him. He stares at my face trying to read it. He gets nothing. He leaves with his shoulders square and his mouth set. I watch his back and think, not enough. I go to Luna before she wakes fully. I stand in the doorway and say nothing and everything with my eyes. She looks at me the way only grandchildren do when they know you are about to do something they will forgive later and curse you for now. I am sorry. I tell her where words cannot go. I will not kill him. I will show him the edge of it. He must meet it now with me, or he will meet it later with someone who wants him dead. I choose me. She nods once. A tiny, hard thing. She is brave in ways that do not make noise. I love her more than is good for a dragon. Tomorrow, then. Chapter 890. The Brink. I wake before the lair. I walk the circle. I drink from the deep basin. I stop at 3 old places and close my eyes. I do not ask the dead for permission. I do not ask the living for blessing. I ask myself if I am ready to be hated for a good reason. Yes. Arthur arrives with damp hair and eyes like clear ice. He bows and says nothing. He feels the shape of the air and knows it is not the same as yesterday. Today we spar without nets. I tell him. I keep my voice even. No drama. Valeria will not cover your heart. Erebus will not give you a second life. If you set the pond, I will cross it. If you show me your back, I will take it. If you stop seeing me, I will put my hand through your chest. His jaw tightens, then loosens. The light in his eyes brightens. He nods once. Luna stands with her hands clasped. Golden light tucked close like a candle cupped against wind. She does not speak. She will not help him until I stop. That is the trust she pays me in. We begin. He opens with God Flash because it is the shortest line to the truth. Pure speed tears a frame out of the world. He is there, then here, then on my left with Valeria's edge already falling. I meet it with an open palm and nothing else. I don't slap it away. I stop it. The shock in his arm tells him how far the road still is. He uses the shock, turns it into a pivot, drives his knee for my hip, plants his foot and short punches the breath where my throat would be if I were a person who had one like his. I sway a finger. The knee misses by nothing. The punch brushes hair. Good. I think. You're not wasting anger. He drops hollow eclipse hard and honest. It is not pretty. It isn't supposed to be. I let it touch my sleeve and I send the weight under us into the floor. The floor groans once and holds. He hears the groan and doesn't chase it. He knows a trap when it whispers. He plants Valeria's tip. The pond rises in a low ring, glass still. I step into it, and for a breath my push turns to warm water against his chest instead of pain. He takes the breath. He closes the pond on his own. He chooses movement over shelter. That is the right choice today. He calls the wings. Gray pages open over his shoulders. The world remembers it is allowed to be closer than it looks. He jumps from a near spot to a nearer one and is suddenly on my right, behind my guard from a normal fighter's point of view. I am not normal. I turn my head. His cut passes in front of my eyes like a ribbon of rain. I taste the iron in it and nod inside. He strings the CQC chain without naming it. One hook draws my hand by a hair. The stomp twists the pull of the floor. The knee appears from a place people do not name. The palm flick resets the drive. The 1-inch bite sends a pain line up my sternum I choose not to respect. The 0-inch feint makes my shadow roll its eyes. I stop being gentle. I step in and shorten distance from safe to sharp. I put my fist on a line that ends at his heart and then take half the distance away. The body knows the math. His eyes widen only for a blink and clear again. He moves his chest half a hand. The fist passes where he was and tells him what would have come next. He keeps his feet under him. He keeps his breath. He keeps his mouth shut. Good boy. Valeria flares across his ribs anyway, as if she could carry him through the gap by will alone. I break her edge with 2 fingers and a twist at the flat. She reforms and tries again. Loyal thing. I could love her too if I let myself. Erebus feels the temperature of the room shift and brings up the soft version of his domain. No corpses, no theft. Just bone-script ribs and a low song that tries to make the wild sit. I let him finish the first line and then I walk through it. The choir falters, not because it is weak, but because this is my home and I choose what sings the loudest. He bows his head and retracts the lattice with neat hands. Wise king. Arthur sees his nets fall away. He does not reach for them again. He reaches inside instead. He moves cleaner now. Less spice, more bread. He makes the air rustle less. He stops aiming at where he wants to be and starts aiming at what I am doing now. He lets go of the part of him that wants to show me a new trick and works with the old tools until they are sharp enough to shave hair. That is what I wanted. I give him 3 openings that would tempt him any other day. He takes none. He takes the 4th, the ugly one, the one that wins fights and makes no good stories. He jams my wrist with the heel of his hand and uses the jam to slide past me. He could have cut. He chooses to hit my back with a short palm that sets up the next cut. He has stopped counting wins and started counting entries. I like this boy. I hit him. Not to punish. To show him the cliff. I throw a straight back fist at his jaw without the usual tell. I let it arrive when he believes he is safe. He sways late and pays for it with blood. The red line at the edge of his mouth looks good on him. He smiles through it. Men like him keep score with strange coins. He takes 2 steps back, sets the pond again, and this time he does not watch it. He uses the ring to erase a tail flick I throw to make him blink. He doesn't blink. He steps. This is how tools should be used. He loads Stellar Cascade, but not to hurt me this time, to slow my hands. He drops 3 stars on my wrists and 1 at my ankle. They don't hurt. They don't need to. They change the rhythm of what my body likes to do next. He shaves a breath off the beat. He tries to step into that cut beat. I cut the rhythm back. We meet in simple things. Fist, blade, breath, step. The room feels small and clean and bright. Luna's light shakes in her hands and then steadies again. She is brave. She trusts me to stop before the end. I hate that I am making her practice this kind of trust. Forgive me, I say to her where a dragon prays. Arthur's eyes are clear now. No panic. No begging anger. He is here. Finally. He forgot the ceiling. He forgot the shelf. He forgot mid-radiant and remembered only now. That is the door. I push it open for him by trying to close it on his fingers. I put my fist on his sternum with a short, ugly shot. He throws a 0-inch bite into my knuckle at the same time. It hurts exactly as much as it should. We both adjust our faces by the same small amount. We both learn. It is almost fun. I show him my tail, not as a whip, as a line. I draw the only safe step in the room. He takes it because he isn't stupid. Then I remove the step and put a palm on his face from a breath he didn't know he had. His inner ear rings. He almost falls. He does not. He plants Valeria's tip. The pond blooms wide and calm. I walk across the water. He closes the pond with a hiss and brings up the wings. The gray pages open wide. The room moves. He is beside me without the world drawing the line in between. He swings not for my neck, not for my heart, but for the place in the shoulder where power starts. That is a smart cut. I let it land on scale that isn't there, because I am not there either. He breathes out. I hear the swear under his breath and smile. He does not quit. He reaches deeper. Mythweaver writes a small note in the margin of the fight. This claw passes where I was. The lair tolerates the note. He steps through that sentence and lands a short punch high on my ribs. It doesn't harm me. It makes me admit I liked how he got there. I pay him by letting the next shot graze my coat. He tastes that and pushes. He is at the door again. This time he does not look at the handle. He walks through. The air around him feels thin and bright and heavy all at once. Not rank. Not title. Presence. He stops forcing his pieces to line up. They do it on their own. He is sword and step and breath and boy and father and friend and fury in one thing. The room agrees for a heartbeat that he belongs at this table. He raises Valeria. The gray hums low. I know what he is going to do by the way the hair on my arms lifts. World's edge. He doesn't call it. He makes it. A thin ring of cut forms in the air. It is not loud. It is not proud. It is just there the way a knife is just there when you pull it. He brings it down with no flourish. I meet it as I must. Palm up, old law in my wrist, lair under my feet. It stops a hair from the thing a cut does. He breathes out a sound that is not defeat and not victory. He learned something only that ring could teach. I could end the lesson here. It would be a clean end. I promised myself something worse. I decide to take him to the brink. I do not say it out loud. I do not announce the blow. I step through his guard and draw a knuckle back for the heart. He reads the line too late because he is human and I am not. The meridian is not on him. Valeria surges into place on her own. Sweet, loyal fire. Tries to be his breastplate. I break her edge because I can. Erebus lifts a ward as thin as paper and as brave as a standard in bad wind. I walk through it because I must. I do not hit at full weight. I put as much death in the strike as a man can meet and live if he is ready to cross. I mean to stop if he cannot. His eyes go very wide and then very calm. He accepts the line. He chooses to be here for it. He plants his foot. He sets the pond and then shuts it off so he doesn't hide. He raises Valeria for no reason but to have her with him. He meets the blow with his chest and the last clean piece of breath he has left. The room hums once. Black plum blossoms appear in the air. They are not a trick. They are not mine. They fall across the space between us as if distance is a word that lost its meaning. They strike my cheek with soft weight, and the lair rings like glass struck by a spoon. The knuckle I drew for his heart lands open. My palm on his sternum. Not a blow but a touch. I freeze it there. I have not seen these blossoms in an age. The last time I felt them. A boy with gold hair and dusk-red eyes laughed at me for waiting politely for time to grant me a mercy I had not earned. I do not look away from Arthur. I do not let him think I was distracted. I owe him that respect. I smile anyway because old dragons have the right to smile at ghosts. Julius, I think, and the thought tastes like good ache. You were right. The blossoms drift down like quiet rain. The lair holds its breath with me. And then the world waits for what comes next. Chapter 891. Gray Blossoms 1. The blossoms that touch my cheek are not black after all. Up close they are gray, petals the color of refusal. They do not float. They choose. They cross the air as if distance is a suggestion and land with a soft sting that makes the lair sing like glass. Then they come in a wave. Gray plum blossoms burst outward from Arthur in a slow spiral that is not slow at all. The room fills with a light mist that smells faintly of rain on stone. Petals drift, then turn sharp in the same breath, tilting edge on as they pass. Where they cut, light frays a hair. I know this pattern. It has walked across battlefields I remember. Mount Hua's violet mist divine art grade 6. A gentle art when done by the book, a storm when held by a hand that means it. But the color is wrong. He has poured gray into it. You little thief, I think, and I am pleased. Good choice. Arthur's crown of twilight steadies above his brow. The gray around him is not thin anymore. Stacks, it breathes. His new rank settles in my lair like a second heartbeat. Mid-radiant. The change is simple to describe and hard to fake. He can feed the gray faster now, and he can decide with it instead of begging it. The pages of his wings flex once, deeper, thicker, like paper switched for hammered leaf. Valeria arcs along his arm as liquid armor and then forms a clean blade without a seam. Erebus's presence tucks itself close. Domain held back, engines quiet, because the room belongs to someone else for the next few breaths, and the Lich King has good manners when all walks by. Blossoms reach me. I step into them without blinking. They are not fire. They are not knives. They are choices written small. The first brush kisses my cheekbone. The second skates my jaw. The third turns its face to me and tries to become a seal on my wrist. I roll my wrist and the petal slides off with a soft hiss. Pretty. Hungry. Arthur moves. No shout. No flaring aura. He vanishes and appears a half-step to my right. The clean, bright snap of God flash. Pure speed in pure light, but now the mist hides the frame he deletes. His afterimage doesn't lag. It blends. Valeria's edge comes for my shoulder in a cut that begins inside the falling blossoms and arrives covered in them, like rain wrapping a line. I meet the cut with a turned palm. The edge stops. His arm doesn't. He lets the stop turn into a pivot and steps through the space where my hip would be if I were lazy. He's not guessing anymore. He's reading. The blossoms answer his step. A dozen tilt and move, not random, guided. Gray runs along their veins like ink pulled by capillary force. They find angles on my forearms and throat as if they have seen this exchange before. This is Mount Hua's art, yes, but in Mount Hua the flowers distract. Here they aim. He loads a soft stellar cascade inside the mist, small, star-bright cuts that don't chase me. They wait for me. He puts 3 at my wrist bones and 1 behind my heel. They don't hurt. They ask the room to remember them when my hand passes. I feel the tug and smile. He is finally using barrage to change rhythm, not just to fill space. Ho! I say, because I allow myself that much sound. Pretty. Arthur does not answer. Good. He is busy. He plants Valeria's tip for a breath. Pond of tranquility blooms low and clear around his feet. A ring of calm that eats incoming force within reach of the blade. He has learned to set it and step off it in the same motion, no leaning, no hiding. I test it with a simple shove of air. The shove becomes warm water and rolls away. He is already gone, using the pond as a breath and not a house. The gray blossoms swarm again. This time they don't drift. They line up in strings like beadwork and sweep in from behind me, where my tail makes angles nobody else sees. They aren't trying to cut scale. They're trying to catch timing. I turn my tail a hair and 3 strings miss. The 4th nicks the place where power starts in a dragon's shoulder. It doesn't hurt. It does make me admit he aimed well. He keeps pressing. I can feel it in the floor, the way his weight starts living under him instead of falling to the edges. He chains arc hook spiral into ground reversal stomp and does not say their names with his body. He just does them. The stomp flips the pull of the room for a breath. The blossoms slide with it and become a low curtain on my shin. He tries to make me lift my foot. I do not. He does not pout. He flows into a phantom step knee that appears from a dead angle. I sway and hear the wind of it whistle my coat. Good noise. He disappears again. God flash. Absolute. Waist shaved clean into my shadow. Singularity stitches the straightest line to my throat. I turn my head a finger width and let the line pass in front of my eyes. Cuts a blossom in 2. The 2 halves keep flying like broken moons. He bleeds from the lip where I touched him earlier, and now he smiles with it. The gray likes that. He gets brighter, not larger, denser. The crown above him hums like a sword being tuned. The pages of his wings flare once, and the room folds an inch. I step forward into him and throw a straight fist at his chest from a distance that should be too close to draw real power. He reads it. He accepts it. He brings Valeria up not to block, but to meet me, and his star cuts at my wrist delay my hand a breath. And that breath is the one he uses for a 0-inch punch hidden inside his guard. It lands. It does not hurt me. Tells me he found the door. There you are. I think, teeth showing now. Hello, mid-radiant. The blossoms thicken. The mist turns into veils. I've seen this trick, the way Mount Hua hides a blade inside fall a flower. But Arthur uses gray, and gray is not perfume. It is sentence. The veils aren't hiding his blade. They are carrying it. He steps through 2 veils, pages of refusal, then appears at my back without the world drawing the line in between. Wings of eclipse flex and let him choose where adjacent lives. Valeria bites for the place just under my left shoulder blade. I move the scale. He doesn't fight the miss. He uses the momentum to draw a clean half-moon across my waist and then lets the blade fall for my ankle as if he's known me for a century. I answer in simple ways because simple makes truth clear. A small turn of the hip, a short lift of the foot, a palm that talks to his forearm like 2 old friends. He reads them all. He pushes harder. Chapter 892. Gray Blossoms. 2. Hollow eclipse drops in the middle of it. Pure power bundled tight into a single downstroke. Except he doesn't try to crush me with it. He ties it to the violet mist pattern and turns the blow into a storm of heavy petals that land with weight instead of cuts. They try to pin me. Clever. I walk out of it and admire the idea even as I refuse it. He breathes once. Long, even, and the gray rises again. More. Mid-radiant has given him more wood for the fire and a better chimney. He can push it without choking on smoke. The lair feels it. The crystal ribs of my home brighten and then hold. They are strong. He will not crack them today. World's edge. This time it is not loud. It is clean. The thin gray circle opens around us and says a small thing. Inside this line, it counts. He brings it down like a quiet verdict. I catch it with my palm and my law. It stops a hair from making the world say yes. He doesn't snarl. He doesn't sag. He simply accepts the answer, files it, and moves. The gray plum blossoms come at me again. But now they are Arthur's first, Mount Hua's second. They no longer look like petals. They look like decisions. Each one is a small no sent to the places my body likes. One says no to my wrist turning now. One says no to my weight sliding there. One says no to my tail choosing that line. I step around the nose and sometimes step with them to see if he will let me borrow his own notes. He does not. Good boy. He is shining. Not in light. In clarity. I am excited. Old predators are hard to excite. We have seen tricks, lines, prayers, boasts, miracles. We have seen despair and hope play chess and both cheat. This is not a trick. This is a boy doing the thing right. Arthur. I say without meaning to. It slips out like a grandmother saying a name under her breath when a child finally rides the bike by himself. Good. He hears me. He does not look at me. He puts the compliment on a shelf and uses the space it made to step closer. I decide it is time to end this. Forgive me, Luna. I tell the place in me that keeps that child safe. He will not thank me now. He will later or he will not. Both are allowed. I raise the room back to the clean state but higher than what I used before. 20 parts in 100 of myself, no more. Constants hold still. Probabilities stop wobbling. The gray around him does not dim. It simply finds it has fewer places to borrow leverage. Arthur feels it. He does not panic. He shortens. No wasted steps. No extra breath. He keeps the violet mist going. But the blossoms change, fewer, denser, slower, heavier. He's not trying to fill the sky. He's putting weight on hinges. He flashes once, pure and quiet, and appears at my throat with Valeria's flat instead of her edge. He's aiming to shove my windpipe, not slice it, because he knows my scales like shatter glass on a bad angle. Smart. I let the flat kiss me and do not let it do anything else. He accepts. He rolls the flat into a hook for my ear and then lets it go to take a short punch with his empty hand. I push his knuckles a finger and his shot lands on bone that does not mind. The blossoms turn and hit me. Not many. Enough. 3 along the line of my jaw. 1 on the cheekbone. 1 on the bridge of my nose. Each one lands like a polite knock that carries a thread. The thread tries to tie my motion to the mist. A lesser thing would slow here. I do not. I feel the tug and admire the courage it takes to try to leash a dragon's face. He is breathing hard now. Not panicked. Just alive. Sweat beads on his temple. Blood paints his mouth. The crown sings. Valeria hums against his palm. The gray asks for one more clean thing. He gives it. He steps in. No tricks. No frames missing. Just a step that accepts I am faster and stronger and older and that none of that matters this step because he is going to take it anyway. He brings the blade across my belly, short and honest, and he brings his shoulder into me like a man who means to move a mountain with a push because someone he loves is trapped under it. I let him move me. Half a finger. It is a gift. Payment. Promise. Then I end it. I draw a straight line with my fist that stops midway and becomes a soft tap under his jaw. Not power. Switch. I reach into the thin space between his gray and his nerves and I nudge. For a breath his timing slips. His body says sleep. His spirit reaches to argue. I put a hand on his sternum to quiet the argument. He sways. He tries to stay. He almost does. Enough, I say. And this time the word is not a lesson. It is a blanket. His eyes meet mine. They are bright and annoyed and grateful and stubborn. He tries to speak. He doesn't need to. I catch him under the arm before he falls. Valeria melts, quick and worried, to cushion his ribs. Erebus lowers a palm and sets a single bone-script pillar behind his back so I don't have to bend too far to lay him down. We are all, for a breath, the same kind of creature. Those who keep this one boy from cracking when the hard thing is done. Luna is there in the next step, light already gathering in her hands, golden eyes wide and wet and fierce. She glares at me, then at herself for glaring, then at me again because she is not done being honest. He crossed it. I tell her low. Mid-radiant. Clean. He did it well. She nods, chin tight. I know. Then, after a breath, softer. Thank you. I huff a laugh that is not quite a laugh. I am trying to be a good grandmother and a good dragon. I tell myself and fail at both in equal measure. That will have to do. Arthur sleeps. The gray calms. The blossoms fade. The lair lets breath out. I look at the place where one petal dared tie a thread to my nose and I touch it with one finger. Amused. Mount Hua would not recognize what he just did with their art. That is fine. Arts should grow when they find new hands. Gray likes books that do not end. Zenith Blade. I say, tasting his epithet because he has earned the sound of it today, and then I lean down and brush my knuckles lightly against his hair the way no one but a grandmother would dare. Rest, I add. Tomorrow we see how long you can hold the sky. Chapter 893. The Iron Line. The southern border was not a suggestion. It was a wall you could not see until you tried to touch it. Along a span of mountains, deserts, and river gorges, the Vizirian crown and its allied beast blood families held a continuous cordon. Hard checkpoints cut into stone, Etherite ward towers every 10 kilometers, drone nests, buried sensors, and quick reaction flights on hot standby. Locals called it the Iron Line. The Abyssal kin called it other things, most of them curses. Just before dawn, the Iron Line lit up. On the palace command floor in Valdris, wall screens flipped from night maps to live feeds. Satellite passes, high-altitude drones, wardline telemetry, and checkpoint cameras all told the same story. Increased pressure everywhere the border touched wilderness. Velthera Sector Sluice Fort 3, Captain Yoren reported, pulling up a canal feed. A dark sheen ran over the water, then broke into harmless ripples as it hit the thin, invisible film stretched across the gates. Null trace on the surface. Etherite membrane held. No cross. Drakmore North turn. Logistics added. Opening a ground penetration view. Soil softened under the asphalt just outside the border fence. An abyssal sink seemed forming and closing in a heartbeat. We pre-routed cargo at 0300. Repair crews rolling with braces. Pyros singing caves, said the Minister of Wards. A low audio bar vibrated through the floor, a fraction flat. Lay pressure. Same hymn signature as last quarter, higher amplitude. King Marcus Vizirian stood behind the table, flame-red hair tied back, golden eyes fixed on the map. He had the steady aura of a low radiant weight without flash. At his right, Queen Lyralii, Nyx's tiger bloodline, watched in silence, every line of her stillness alert. At his left, Prince Ian, peak immortal, read the same data with fists half-closed. He was close to breaking through. Everyone in the room could feel it. They're not probing for gaps, Marcus said at last. They're leaning on the whole line. They want us to stretch our response and thin the wall, Lyralii replied. Force premature deployments. They want me airborne before I'm through, Ian said, voice even. They'll get you airborne, Marcus said. But on our rules. A soft chime cut across the room. Duskline Pass, one of the hardest gates on the Iron Line. Sable, the command AI, put the feed onto the main wall. Bone gliders rode a thermal seam beyond the fence. Black frames like torn wings with nothing inside them. 8, then 10, then 14. Riders wore matte gear and anti-spectral spray that blurred faces even to the best cameras. Authorize? Asked the keeper of riders from the lower rail, already half-turned for the flight pit. Marcus didn't hesitate. 3 flights. Prince leads. Rules. Intercept and push back. If the null song starts, fall under ward. No chase beyond Second Ridge. No heroics. Yes, Your Majesty. Ian was gone before the echo finished. The balcony doors hissed open to cold air and blue morning. In the flight pit below, skystone gantries swung out, harness lines hummed, and 3 drakes crouched, scale armor and smart fabric tight along their flanks. Riders' AR visors snapped down. Ethernet channels went green. Ian's voice came clear over the room speakers, calm and clipped. Gold on me, silver high left, bronze low. Hold formation. No solos. We don't give them footage. Drakes leapt. Breath turned hot and controlled. The 3 flights rose and tipped toward the pass. Across the south, the status amber banner slid onto phones and wall slates. Border activity. Be ready. Sleep in boots.
No sirens. No panic.
The Iron Line didn't shout unless it had to. Below the command floor, the ward choir, 30 elder women with dragon rings and steady lungs, took their places around the Etherite core. Engineers ran the counter-hymn patch and nodded once. You don't kill the abyssal null song by screaming louder. You set a human note under it and make the world remember itself. Flights in contact, Sable said. Duskline opened on the main screen in a long, high shot. Switchback road, cliff walls, thermal shimmer. The bone gliders banked. Ian didn't cut straight through. Gold road center, silver slid high, bronze dropped low. At the last second Ian flared a white flash off Gold's chest. Aimed for side cameras, not eyes, and bronze came up like a hook under a jaw. 2 gliders folded. The rest spread like oil. The null song slid in. The ward choir answered. Warm, ordinary sound rose from the Etherite lattice through stone and air. The waveform on the side panel steadied. Drone feeds switched bands without hiccup. The gliders lost their clean edges for half a breath. That was enough. On Duskline's left wall, the cliff softened. Not melt, yield. Rock sank an arm's length like bad bread. Under it, something moved in ways rock should not. Lyraliai's pupils narrowed. Seam. Ian pivoted midair. Silver bled lift from the softened pocket. Bronze carved low, and gold drew a razor line of fire across the seam. Not a bloom. A cut. The cliff took the heat and remembered it was stone. The movement under it stopped being anything at all. 2 riders fell, trusting soft that wasn't soft anymore. Bronze was there. Hook, pull, finish. No trophies. No cruelty. The Iron Line didn't make long ghosts. The null song cracked. The gliders peeled and fled. Ian held formation 1 extra heartbeat, habit, then called the turn. Recall. They came home fast. 1 Drake limp-roped between 2 Medrones. Rider pale but awake. Harness auto-injectors had already sealed the worst. 2 more with shallow cuts. Etherite sealant had turned red to pink by the time they hit the pit. Ian walked into the command room with his helmet under 1 arm and soot across his cheekbone. We held, he said. You did, Marcus agreed. He didn't add more. Praise at the wrong time dulls edges. Lyraliai stepped in close and wiped the soot with her thumb. Ian didn't pretend he was too old for it. No one in Valdris cheered. They adjusted. Orders rolled out across the Iron Line. Velthra's sluices got fresh membranes before lunch. Drakmore's soft ground tile was braced with iron ribs by noon. The Pyros Cave Wardhouse received an updated counter-hymn and extra tea rations for the choir. The Queen's Nyx cataphracts rotated to ground quick reaction in the low sectors. Striped armor, crescent blades, electric bikes silent as cats. The steel ibex caravans from the mountain clans took the outside road loops that hugged the fence instead of the cut-throughs. Everyone knew their map. The allied families watched their own corners. The Nyx Tigers held the city gates and the fast ground. The Storm Griffin riders from the coastal baronies shared air watch on the seaside. The Sand Viper clans patrolled the dunes with sensor stakes and old patience. The Deep Stag Wardens kept the high forests tight. The Vizirian Crown ran the whole board. But the board worked because every square had a name on it. By noon, the Abyssal Kin tried again. They always do. Null sigils turned up under a service bridge where camera coverage dipped by a meter. Night crews found them at 3:12 and scrubbed them with solvent while a drone filmed. The clip went to clan heads with a simple caption. Cleared before shift change. Proof keeps faith. A cold wave slid across a reservoir east of Velthra. Surface skinned over for a breath. The Etherite film flexed and held. Fish scattered, then came back. The water plant's board flashed yellow, then green. 3 years ago, that would have been a citywide alarm. Now it was a maintenance ticket and a note to replace 2 gaskets. The singing caves at Pyros dipped off-key again. The ward choir's bread-warm note carried through the lattice. The caves found their pitch. The cavekeeper sent a short message to the palace. Tell your singers we heard them. Lyralii printed it and pinned it on the cork board in the Hall of Small Victories. That board stayed full on purpose. All day the strict rules held. Nothing crosses. Nothing lingers where it shouldn't. Spaced out along the Iron Line, Heavy Gates, Ironvale, Southgate Crown, Dusk Line, Blue Sluice, Ash Cut. Logged every entry, every exit. There were no open zones. Even humanitarian corridors were timed and watched by 2 families at once. By late afternoon, the map calmed to a steady glow. Status Amber stayed up. People worked, ate, and kept their boots near the door. The Iron Line did not relax. It shifted weight and waited for the next push. In the practice hall that evening, Ian ran drills in silence until sweat darkened his shirt. Peak Immortal fit him cleanly now. When he stood still, his breath made the ward metal rails hum a note you couldn't hear with ears. He was close. He knew wanting it wouldn't cross the gap faster. Marcus found him at the open window when the mountain turned gold. "You're close," the king said, like he was noting the weather. "I can touch it," Ian answered. "If I push, it slips." "You don't push," Lyralii said from the doorway. "You step. Let it take you. Like water." Ian huffed a quiet laugh. "Yes, mother." "Eat," she said, handing him a bowl. "You won't break through hungry." Across the border sectors, the allied families checked in on secure calls. The Panther Lord from the Black Steppe swamps promised more boats under the reeds at night. The Crane Matriarch sent updated flight corridors for the coast. The Badger Magistrate uploaded road brace models and a budget that miracle balanced. No long speeches. No posturing. The South's politics were old, but everyone understood the line. Arthur Nightingale's name came up once in a logistics note. Etherite resupply schedule matched to the Wardhouse's draw rates, and then moved on. The Ouroboros Accord had been inked years ago. Its systems were normal now. What mattered today was simple. The South had tools, people trained to use them, and a plan that didn't change with the wind. Night fell clear and cold. The amber banner stayed up. Patrols doubled along the quiet stretches. The ward choir did one last set, laughed about the pancakes they cooked on a hot plate between songs, and sent the clip to the barracks. 100 phones chimed. 100 tired soldiers smiled and slept a little easier. On the highest balcony, Ian stood alone with the city lights below and the border lights beyond. He closed his eyes and listened. The seam was there, thin as silk, stubborn as truth. He breathed once, and for a heartbeat the mountain seemed to breathe with him. "Soon," he said, soft enough that only the stone heard. In the command room, Marcus signed the last orders. Lyralii checked the night roster and left a handwritten note for the ward choir. "Thank you for the song." The Iron Line held, strict, bright, and ready. When Ian broke through to low radiant, the South would have 2 radiant pillars under its own banner, not counting the Guardian. Then the plan would change from hold to advance. Not before. Until that day, the border stayed what it was built to be. A hard line you could not cross, watched by dragons and tigers and 1,000 other names that meant home. Chapter 894, War on the Iron Line. The southern border did not ask. Told. Towers every 10 kilometers. Fences layered with etherite film. Drone nests on ridges and in culverts. Checkpoints built into the rock. The Vizierian crown called it the Iron Line. The Abyssal Kin had other names for it, all bitter. At 5:42 local, every tower display blinked to black for a single breath, then returned with a new line of text at the top left. War.
No horns.
No speech. Just one word and a flood of red pins crawling along 3 sectors at once. On the palace command floor in Valdris, the wall screens woke in layers. Satellite passes. High-altitude drones. Wardline telemetry from the etherite lattice that ran like a second set of nerves under the mountains. Road cameras from the lonely places where you could stand for an hour and hear nothing but wind. Duskline pass, multiple air contacts, Captain Yoren said, fingers sliding across the projection. Iron veil, soil liquefaction along the outer fence. Blue sluice, surface skin moving against the gate film. King Marcus Vizierian stood with his hands on the rail, flame-red hair tied back, golden eyes steady. Low radiance sat on him like gravity, present, unadorned. At his right, Queen Lyralii kept her arms folded and her gaze sharp. Her Nyx tiger bloodline showed in the calm way she watched for the first mistake. At his left, Prince Ian leaned forward, peak immortal humming around him like heat before lightning. He was close to low radiant. Everyone who spent time in the ward rooms could feel it in the way the palace metal vibrated when he exhaled. "They're moving in blocks, not probes," Marcus said. "They expect the first line to bend," Lyralii answered. "They've timed the pushes to split us." Ian didn't wait for his name. "Duskline." Marcus nodded once. "You lead 3 flights. Rules of engagement hold. Intercept, break their lines, push them back before they settle. If the null song starts, fall under ward. No chase past the second ridge."
No heroics.
"Yes, father." The flight pit under the balcony came alive. Gantries swung. Harness lines hummed. Drakes took their places without complaint. Bronze, silver, and gold, scale armor snug under strips of smart fabric. Riders dropped AR visors. Ethernet channels in their helmets flipped from orange to green. Ian jogged to the edge, the gold drake lowering its head to meet him. He laid a hand under its jaw and felt the strong pulse there answer his own. "Gold on me." His voice came through the command speakers, low and clear. "Silver high left, bronze low cut. Hold formation. Don't give their cameras angles. On my mark." They launched clean. 3 bodies of muscle and hot breath rose into a hard blue. On the wall, the duskline feeds tilted to show the pass from above. Bone gliders rode the thermal seam beyond the fence. Black frames stretched with dead hide, each moving as if a child had imagined a bird and built it badly. Under them, lines of infantry marched between ribcage engines that walked on jointed legs. Below the command floor, the ward choir took their seats around the Etherite core, 30 elder women with dragon rings and steady lungs. Engineers checked the counter-hymn patch and lifted a thumb. You don't shout down the abyssal null song. You set a human note under it and make the world remember its own weight. Blue sluice pressure up 20%, the Minister of Wards said. Membrane holding, secondary film primed. Iron veil soft ground expanding. Logistics added. Braces out. Stakes going in. Flights in contact. Sable, the command AI, said without drama. Duskline opened in long shot. Switchback road, cliff faces, heat shimmer. The bone gliders banked toward the fence, looking for gaps that didn't exist. Ian didn't go straight. He rolled the formation into a crescent, let silver bite high and bronze knife low. He flared a brief white flash off gold's chest at the last heartbeat, angled to blindside cameras, not eyes. Bronze came up like a hook under a jaw. 2 gliders folded. The rest spread like oil. The null song slid in. You feel it first in your teeth, then in your bones. The ward choir's note rose, warm and ordinary, through stone. On the side screen, the waveform steadied. Drone feeds flickered and then found a band that held. The glider's edges went uncertain for 1 beat. It was enough. On Duskline's left wall, the cliff softened a hand's width like bad bread. Under it, something moved in a way rock should not. Lyralii's pupils narrowed. Seam. Ian pivoted midair without overcorrecting. Silver bled lift from the softened pocket. Bronze carved low. Gold drew a thin line of fire along the seam. Not a bloom. A cut. Heat met stone and reminded it what it was. The movement under it stopped being anything at all. 2 riders fell when their mounts trusted soft that was no longer soft. Bronze got there. Hook, pull, finish. No trophies. No cruelty. The iron line did not make long ghosts. Blue sluice, Wards warned. The canal camera showed a black skin moving across the surface at walking speed. The Etherite film bowed, then bulged. It held. The secondary film dropped in a shimmer. The skin hit both and went glassy. A guard touched it with a pole. It shattered like sugar. The water cleared. Gate lights stayed green. The crew cheered once, short and tight, and returned to their boards. Iron veil, logistics called. The soft ground oval had closed. Fence anchors read true. Dune sensors picked up the same shiver, smaller. Sand viper sappers flashed a thumbs up from under the outer mesh and drove a coil into the soil until it hummed. On the pass, the gliders peeled and fled. Ian held formation one heartbeat longer than he had to. Habit. He broke the habit. Recall. They came home fast. One Drake limp-roped between med-drones, rider pale but awake. The harness auto-injectors had already sealed the worst. 2 more set down with shallow cuts already turning pink. Ian walked in with a strip of soot across his cheekbone and his helmet under his arm. "We held," he said. Marcus nodded. "Second wave in 40. Eat. Hydrate." Ian took a bottle from a runner and drank it dry. He didn't look back at the big board. He didn't need to. Sable was already drawing the new picture. War banners rose beyond the fence. Salt rings on black cloth. Slashes that looked like wounds. Null priests in lacquer black carried frame drums and struck them once. The air trembled like a string too tight on a cheap instrument. Behind them, the ribcage engines arranged themselves and locked legs. 3 main thrusts, Sable said. Duskline, Iron Veil, Blue Sluice. Offsets timed at 7 minutes. 12 minor pushes along low-coverage tiles. Intent. Divide response windows. Nix cataphracts to Iron Veil, Marcus said. Storm Griffins to Blue Sluice. Prince takes Duskline with bronze and silver. I anchor ground. Yes, Lyrelii said, already moving. 3 squad leaders in striped armor fell in behind her at a jog. Ian dropped his empty bottle into the bin and ran. The gold Drake lowered without being asked. Harness locked. Visor down. Gold up. Silver and bronze, same splits. Watch for drum clusters. If they try to aim the note, break their hands again. The launch was louder this time. Not the engines. The men. The held-in sound you make when your body wants to shout and you don't let it. Duskline filled with bodies and bone. The priests stepped to the road and set their drums. The sound didn't travel. It occupied. The ward choir's note wavered and then steadied like a person planting their feet. The fence lights dimmed and burned brighter again. Marcus stepped onto the road. Low radiant did not make him flash. It made the world around him behave. Stone under his boots steadied. Edges sharpened. Men on the wall breathed in their own rhythm again. He lifted one hand, closed his fingers, and the nearest engine folded like bad metal. He brought his hand down and set it against the road. It did not get up. Ian cut through air and bone above him. He didn't waste the sight. He used it to settle. Push the priests, he told his wing. Don't get greedy. Bronze went low and mean. Silver peeled gliders off the camera lines. Gold Dove flared at the last heartbeat and gave a shock lance the inch it needed to turn a drum into dead leather. The choir's note flowed into the space the drum had tried to claim. At Iron Veil, Lyrelii's bikes ran the hard strip her scouts had mapped at 3 in the morning. The ground ahead flexed like a grin. She didn't break. She jumped it. Her second file landed past the smile and knifed left where the fence line turned. Her voice stayed level as she marked the bad tiles on her visor for the next file. At my mark. Hard left, then through. If the sand smiles, ignore it. At Blue Sluice, Storm Griffins rode spirals that turned violent on command. Shock lances cracked him cannons into useless frames. One rider slipped, fell, and hit the membrane, which caught him and slid him like a child on ice to a guard rail. He swore once, climbed out, and raised a hand to the wardhouse camera. The clip hit the line, membranes holding. For an hour, war was clean work. The iron line flexed and did not break. The choir's note held. The etherite lattice warmed but did not overheat. Medics ran out of tape before they ran out of sealant. The South had built this on purpose after the last time, and now it paid for itself in lives not lost. The third wave at Duskline changed the shape of things. The ridge beyond the pass shed a skin. Not rock. The shape of rock. Slid stood and put 2 hands on the fence. Where it touched, the lattice screamed without sound. 10 warders jammed etherite spikes into sockets along the inner edge, and the fence lit from within. The thing pushed. The lights dimmed, then steadied. Ian took its knuckles off one by one. Where they fell, they turned to steam and did not return. He didn't think about what that meant. He only made sure they stayed gone. "Keep cutting," he told his wing. "They don't like holding shape." He didn't see the blade that tried for his knee. He felt the intention and rolled. It took a scale off his drake instead. The harness rang. Heat poured into muscle. He breathed through it. "Good," Marcus said softly, not to him, to the fence. The fence listened. By late afternoon, the numbers in the corner of Sable's main screen told a simple story. The Abyssal Kin had lost more bodies than they expected, and the Iron Line had lost fewer than it feared. The choir swapped leads without breaking the note. Someone sent them soup and honey. Someone else sent the clip of last week's pancakes. It made it to 100 phones anyway. Men and women smiled without meaning to. Dark fell clean. The status crimson banner stayed up. Patrols doubled on the quiet stretches. The Allied families rotated their units by plan. The border slept with its eyes open and its hand on its own shoulder. Ian slept 4 hours on a mat in the training hall, boots touching, visor by his chest, blade within reach. He woke before the horn. War had started. The Iron Line had answered. It would answer again. Chapter 895. Duskline Breaker. The second day began before the sun had the right to be up. At 3:17, sensors along the Iron Line ticked from green to amber in a rolling wave. The Abyssal Kin came back in blocks, not streams. Their timing was tighter. Their lines looked cleaner. Sable drew the new picture without commentary. 3 hard pushes at Duskline, Iron Veil, and Blue Sluice, plus gnaws along tiles where the fence ran through bad ground. New icons appeared on the feed rib frames fitted with hanging bells. Null priests in lacquer black with salt-white gloves. "Hymn cannons," the minister of wards said. "They attack ward harmonics. Choir is ready." On the ward floor, 30 elders took their places. The Etherite core thrummed low. Engineers ran the counter-hymn patch again and set a fresh kettle on a hot plate. "Nix to Iron Veil," Lyralii said, already pulling her helmet on. "Griffins hold Blue Sluice. I'll plug the first hole." Marcus met Ian's eyes. The prince didn't need the invite. He was already moving. "Duskline," Marcus said anyway, because saying it made it true for everyone else. "I anchor ground. You take the air. Same rules. No solos. No dead bravery." "Yes, father." The flights launched into a sky lit by ward tower pulses and drone lanes. The fence lights drew a faint line through the fog. In the pass, hymn cannons rang. The sound didn't boom. It rolled. Small, ugly ripples shivered across the road to the fence. The lights dimmed and came back as the choir's note swelled to catch the fall. "Hold," Marcus said. His voice filled the inner net, steady as a drum that knew what it was for. The warders on the anchors straightened their hands and kept them there. The Abyssal Kin poured out of the haze. Priests stepped. Rang stepped. Infantry threw black hooks at the fence and found no purchase. The salt-veiled things loped on all fours and left no prints. The ribcage engines raised the bells higher, searching for the note that would open a seam. Ian cut high and precise. Silver took left. Bronze took right. Gold hammered a wedge until it forgot it was a wedge and became 2 lines. Shock lances cracked. Gliders fell like broken toys and did not rise. "Watch the bells," Ian said. "If they cluster, break the cluster." The fence breathes after that. They broke clusters. The fence breathed. Iron Veil went loud. Lyralii's bikes moved in 2 files along the strip her scouts had marked hard an hour earlier. The sand smiled under their wheels, one flex, then another. She didn't look down. She jumped the grin, landed on the other side, and cut through lacquer and mat plate where it met flesh. Behind her, sand viper sappers drove stakes and threw coils. When the sand tried to move again, it found a grid under its skin and stayed still. Blue Sluice pushed back water like it had been built for nothing else. The membranes flexed, flexed again, and held. The ward house piped the counter-melody into the canal. Fish shook themselves and darted away. Storm griffins dove, made their cracks count, and climbed. One rider slipped again and slid across the membrane to the rail like a kid on a winter hill. He made a face at the camera and climbed back up. The clip went to the line. It wasn't strategy. It was breath. Hours turned into sweat and habit. War did what war always does, tried to turn men into numbers. The South refused to let that happen. Casualties stayed low. The choir's note never failed. Engineers swapped overheated cores before they tripped. Medics worked in rhythm. The iron line did its job. At 9:22, dusk line changed. The air went thin. Drones drifted and corrected. The choir's note trembled for a heartbeat and then went steady again because 30 old women with rings on their fingers refused to give an inch. Sable drew 3 new lines on the ridge, no source, no trail, no label. Unknown, Sable said. Not in catalog. Marcus lifted his head. He didn't look confused. He looked like a man handing a knife to his own hand. Ian felt it before the screens caught it. The world changed weight. His Drake's chest hitched and then found a breath. His hands went dry against the grips. He had fought men. He had fought engines and songs. He had not fought pressure that felt like weather deciding to be mean. A dark patch walked along the ridge. It didn't have legs. It moved anyway. Salt banners lifted without wind. Null priests stopped ringing and bowed, all at once, to a thing that had not finished deciding how to stand. Back, Marcus said into the net. Warders, anchors. Choir, close. Flights, no tricks. We hold until we can't. Ian wanted to glance at his father. He didn't. He raised Gold to a height where he could see the whole pass and not the dark patch, because looking at it tugged at a part of his thinking that drew straight lines. The ridge dimmed. Not shadow. Lack. Every sensor logged the lack and tried to describe it and could not. Sable put one word in a clean box. Unclassified. The pressure rose. The ward lights dimmed and steadied. The hymn cannons went quiet like someone had put a cup over them. The null priests opened their mouths and began to sing something without words that still made the throat hurt. Ian's knees felt light. His hands stayed steady. He guided his Drake with the reins and with the trust they had between them. He had never seen a calamity. The stories were numbers and maps and a few lines of ash where cities used to be. He had believed the stories because he was a prince and believing was part of the job. He believed them with his chest now. The dark patch chose a shape, not a full one, enough to make the mind try and fail to put a name to it. The pressure pressed against the fence and against the people and against the note itself. Describe, Marcus said again. A stone dropped into a loud place. Pressure field increasing, Sable answered. Counter him efficacy down 19% and falling. Drone feeds losing sync above the ridgeline. No visual operator. No analog. Ian felt the seam in himself, the one he had been trying to step through for months, shift like a door opening and closing in the same second. If he pushed at it now, he could get it. If he pushed at it now, he could break in the wrong way and never walk right again. Hold, he told himself, the same way Marcus told the road. Hold. Down below, Marcus set his feet. Low radiant is not bigger blows. It is a promise to the line that the line is real. He lifted his hand. He told the fence to be a fence. It agreed. He told the road to be a road. It obliged. The dark patch took one step forward and made the pass feel small and wrong and open all at once. The ward lights along dusk line flickered to black for the span of a heartbeat and then burned back so hard the cameras washed white. The choir's note cracked like ice and then steadied because the women in that room would die before they let it go off pitch. Ian's Drake shuddered and found him. He breathed once, twice. He tasted metal at the back of his tongue. The men on the wall pressed their hands harder to the anchors. The storm griffins on the blue sluice feed flinched though they weren't there. Even the bikes at Ironvale rolled back an inch as if the ground had exhaled. The dark patch opened. Not a mouth. Not a door. A simple, wrong absence that touched the fence and the fence bent like a bow. Ian's body knew the word before his mind did. Calamity. He tightened his grip. He did not look away. The ridge split along a line no map had drawn, and something older than any drill began to come through. Chapter 896. Third Calamity, 1. Calamity is not a rank. It is a decision the world makes about a thing that shouldn't exist. The ridge above Duskline Pass split open. Stone peeled back like damp paper, fell sideways and settled into coils that weren't coils. A head rose from the tear, crowned in jagged horn knives. It blinked once, and the color drained from the sky. Basilisk. Not the cave kind in old hunting stories. This one was fortress tall, its plates grown from or in night, each seam leaking slow curtains of miasma. Wherever the haze touched, rock bruised, metal dulled. The fence's etherite crystals spidered with hairline fractures that healed and cracked again. Every drone above the ridge lost sync and dived. The ward lights flickered and steadied only because the choir on the floor below forced them to. 30 elder women with dragon rings tightened their hands on the pews and sang the low, warm note the lattice needed to remember what it was. Marcus Viserion stepped onto the road. His draconic blood woke cleanly, without roar or flare. Horn ridges pressed through his hairline like dark gold. Scales rose along his cheekbone and throat, and a tail shadow hung at the edge of sight, more presence than limb. Low radiant gathered around him in a quiet wait. He gripped a long spear whose haft looked grown, not carved, black wood veined with gold. Its tip a narrow leaf of tempered sky. Spear unity sat in his hands like a settled oath. Anchors, he said. Warders hammered etherite spikes into the sockets of the inner road. The fence brightened from within and pushed back the first pressure wave rolling off the basilisk. It held for a breath. 2. Prince Ian rose above Marcus on a gold drake, visor down, breath tight. His own dragon blood answered with youth's heat, short curved horns flaring from his temples, pupils narrowed to slits, canines lengthening. When he inhaled, faint steam curled from his lips. He lifted his hand and the air buckled. His domain unfolded around the flight like a clear shell. Stormcrest domain. Wind pressed smooth under his wing beats. Fire twined through it like bright threads. In that space, drift vanished. Blades turned truer, and the world's noise dimmed. He was peak immortal and close to more, but not yet past the seam. The domain shone anyway. Silver high left, bronze low. Keep the wall between you and that stair, Ian said. If it looks at you, look at the road. The basilisk moved, and the movement wrote new rules. Its gaze passed across the west tower. Stone paled to ash. Iron ties inside turned sandy. A storm griffin rider sliced through the beam, and his wing membrane frosted white in a crawling pattern. He ripped free and spiraled, barely catching air. The membrane held enough. He lived because someone had taught him to fall well. The basilisk opened its mouth. What came out wasn't breath. It was a wave of gray-green that rolled over the fence and turned paint to powder. The choir's steady note shook and then firmed as the conductor slammed her palm into the rail in time. Miasma density at demigod scale. The minister of wards said, voice flat so it wouldn't shake. Countermelody holding at 60%. Dropping. Hold, Marcus said into the internet, and somehow made the word bigger than a command. The basilisk's tail slid across the cliff and the road groaned. Fence posts sang like bowed blades. Ian dove and flared, shock lance biting into horn. The bite meant nothing. The horn smoothed itself in the space between heartbeats. He didn't cut the same point again. He drove Valdris steel into the seam between plates where even demigod things have to bend. The wound opened a hand's width, dark, wrong, and sealed as he passed, haze knitting it like bad skin. His domain narrowed, fewer frills, more spine. Hit and break, he called. Don't stick. He smelled ozone and rot. He tasted copper. He smiled, bare and humorless, and went again. Something walked out of the basilisk's shadow. A man in ribbed lacquer, helm shaped like a snake's skull. He carried a long spear with a double-edged leaf head and a hook flare under it. Miasma clung to him as if it knew his name. Zaldris Dreadfong. Cult leader. Low radiant. His stride had the loose patience of a man who liked his work. He stopped where the shadow fell thickest and lowered his head toward the basilisk. When he rose, his eyes behind the skull mask shone the color of old poison. King of the South. he said without raising his voice, and somehow it carried through the clash. Stand again. I would see you without your dragon to hide behind. Marcus didn't answer. He leveled his spear and set his back foot. Zaldris turned his skull mask toward the sky. Prince. The air who breathes like a furnace and thinks it makes him a sun. Come down. Learn how quick blood cools. Ian's domain flexed harder. He wasn't fool enough to drop into a duel when the ridge was cracking open. He skimmed low instead and sheared the nearest null priest's drum free. The man's song died unfinished. That bought heartbeats. The choir needed all of them. Zaldris flicked his spear. 3 thin blades of bad air cut off the tip and flew like quiet thoughts. Ian rolled. One kissed his boot. Leather hissed, hardened, and then flaked. He flexed, the material cracked, and he kept moving. Marcus met Zaldris in the basilisk spray. Miasma turned to steam where it touched their auras. Spear met spear and didn't clatter. The sound was closer to a deep chime. Marcus cut simple lines into the road, right angle, straight edge, measured pace, and the ground became those lines under Zaldris's feet. The cult leader smiled with his mouth and nothing else. He let his spear bend like a living thing and skated over a gap that hadn't been there a moment before. Weapon unity against weapon unity. Marcus's spear unity made thrusts that arrived before the shoulder moved and cuts that could choose where the world ended. Zaldris's unity, Fang spear, built for coil and snap, stole half-steps and turned them into full ones. He bled miasma from the hook under the blade into threads that wanted to be ropes. You hold, Zaldris said, pleased. Let's see if you hold when the sky says you shouldn't. The basilisk exhaled again. The fence bowed like a drawn bow. Anchors groaned. The warder's hands went white. The choir's note cracked and then steadied because the woman on the left caught her neighbor by the waist and didn't let her fall from her stool. Ian made an ugly choice and cut too close for pride. The basilisk's gaze brushed his visor. He didn't look into it. That didn't matter. His teeth rang. A patch of his drake's left wing went the color of bone in a crawling creep. Ground, he said, voice flat on purpose. The drake trusted him. They dropped hard onto a shelf, sliding sparks. Ian jammed a vial into the whitened membrane. The etherite sealant spread and ate the wrong color until life remembered itself. He climbed back up before the shelf knew it had been a mistake to hold him. Lyreliai's voice snapped across Ironvale's channel. Ignore ground smiles. Hard left, then through. Bikes lifted across a dune like a moving thought. Viper sappers drove coils into sand and made it honest. Storm griffins at Blue Sluice flew spirals that turned violent in a blink and cracked him cannons open like shells. None of it mattered to the thing on the ridge. The basilisk drew itself taller. Ropes of miasma hung from its armor and writhed. They fell toward Marcus like hungry tongues. The first rope didn't reach him. Marcus's spear wrote a neat circle in the air, and somehow the rope respected the edge and slid off. The second rope did. It struck his side and hissed. Scales blackened. He turned the pain into footing and stepped into a thrust that should have punched a hole in Zaldris's chest. The cult leader bent like a reed, the spearhead skimming his ribs without finding purchase. He laughed again. A low, amused sound Marcus didn't hate more because he didn't have time. Ian judged distance wrong by a thumb's width and paid. The basilisk's gaze licked across him again. He jerked his head away in time to save his eyes. His visor flashed white, cracked, and spidered. He ripped it off and tossed it without looking. He pushed his domain to its edge and it pushed back. The shell tightened. The wind under his wings sharpened. The fire inside it narrowed to a line that ran along his bones. The world stopped being everywhere at once and became one clean slice where he needed it. He cut. The cut landed, mattered, and healed under his eyes. This was the part where men broke. He tasted copper, spat, and went again. The basilisk moved its head a fraction. The fence lights died and came back so hard the cameras washed out. The choir swayed on their stools and didn't fall because they were holding each other upright and singing like mothers steadying frightened children. Zaldris's spear slid in low under Marcus's guard and nicked his cheekbone. The line of blood smoked. He didn't wipe it. He didn't gift it meaning. He answered with a step that turned into a wall where no wall had existed, and Zaldris bounced off it with a pleased grunt. "Good," Zaldris said. "Stay good while the world tips." Above them, the basilisk chose to lean. The fence bowed. The anchors screamed. The road fractured in a spiderweb. Ian's domain shivered, shrank, and held against a weight it had never been asked to carry. For one stretched heartbeat, all of it, fence, choir, flights, bikes, lungs, balanced on the edge of a blade. Then something small and quiet started falling through the air. Gray plum petals. They spun without breeze, flat as cut paper, each one the color of refusal. They touched miasma ropes, and those ropes forgot to be ropes. They touched the wrong color in the wing membrane, and it blushed back to life. They touched the edge of Zaldris's spear, and the steel recognized it was a thing that could be set down. Zaldris stopped smiling. The petals drew a rough circle around him. Not a trap, a decision. He lifted his spear and felt weight. Not muscle weight, story weight. The next step he wanted wasn't there. Somewhere between one breath and the next, a line appeared. It ran from the thought of Zaldris's throat to the thought of his hip and made both true. His body understood what it was and obeyed neatly. The snakeskull helm split cleanly. The spear slid from hands that were already not hands. His have stayed upright for the span of a blink and then chose the ground. Marcus didn't waste a word on it. He didn't have one to spare. He lifted his spear and told the fence it still had a job. The fence agreed. Ian looked up, breath held without meaning to. Space a few paces in front of Marcus folded like a page and unfolded on the road. No crack, no light, just an edit everyone accepted. Arthur Nightingale stepped through as if the pass had been waiting for him. Black hair lifted in the pressure of a power the world had learned to recognize. Azure eyes swept basilisk, fence, king, prince, corpses, and catalogued the living before they drifted to the dead. Above his brow, a muted crown of gray spun, a ring that wasn't light so much as intent. Armor flowed over him in a second skin, Valeria ancient and eager, plates that knew the shape of his joints and a blade that grew from her grip into his. Behind him, a tall figure in bone and robe stepped out of a shadow that belonged to nothing nearby. Erebus, Lich King, let a whisper of his necropolis lean into the world and leaned it back. Cold that didn't freeze ran across the road and then behaved itself. At Arthur's shoulder, Luna took form in her grown shape. Amethyst hair, golden eyes. Pure light already bright around her palms as she scanned the wounded along the wall. From Arthur's back, two gray wings unfolded. Not feathers, pages. Flat, perfect planes that bent adjacency and made two places decide they touched. He looked up at the basilisk. He smiled. Chapter 897. Third Calamity. 2. I arrived on the road already moving. Valeria flowed up my arm and across my ribs in a cool rush, plating my joints and shaping a blade into my hand. The gray crown above my brow steadied. The wings of Eclipse opened behind me. Two flat pages of refusal that made places I wanted touch. Touch. I took in the field in one breath. Fence bowing but honest. Ward choir shaking but singing. Marcus on the line. Scales along his jaw. Spear planted like a promise. Ian above, domain tight around the choir instead of himself. Good horns out, eyes sharp. And the thing on the ridge. A basilisk the size of a fortress. Miasma leaking from every seam. Demigod weight in its stare. Not a threat, I decided. Erebus, I said. The Lich King stepped from a shadow that didn't belong to any wall and bowed his skull. I pointed at the map hovering in my mind. Open the necropolis and give me everything. Reinforce the iron line. Anchor to their etherite. Priorities. Ward houses, choir, medevac. Then kill anything with a salt ring. As you will, he said, voice like old paper. The world went colder, then organized. Bone gates bloomed along the inner road. From them marched cohorts in plate made of polished death. Shields engraved with lines of law. Wormbone cataphracts thundered out. Rib lances lowered. Ossuary guns unfolded like blooming flowers and locked onto him cannons with calm hunger. White-robed redeemers of ash carried lanterns that burned with gentle light and planted obelisks that drank miasma and gave nothing back. The southern soldiers flinched, then saw who the undead hit and stopped flinching. "Luna," I said. She was already moving, golden eyes wide, amethyst hair lifting in the war wind. Pure light pooled around her hands. "Protect the warders and heal everyone you can," I told her. "Kill it fast," she answered, not breaking stride. I smiled. Valeria made a tiny vibration against my wrist. Trajectory hints. Angles asking to be used. I stepped. God flash. Absolute carried me from the road to the basilisk snout inside the span of a drumbeat. The wings folded one page over another. The world accepted that the two places touched. The monster opened its mouth, and a carpet of green-gray rolled down to eat color. I set Valeria's tip to the stone between us. Pond of tranquility. Calm rang out the way a bell rings out. The wave came in and forgot what it was supposed to be. It folded into itself and slid past without touching anything I loved. I moved. The basilisk's gaze swept, wrong, heavy, meant to make men brittle. The pages behind me turned with a lazy flip, and line of sight broke like a bad habit. I hit it with my fist first. 0-inch punch into scale and bone. The shock didn't explode out. It collapsed in, then unrolled through the skull in a neat line that made nerves go quiet. The head reeled. Lines of miasma hiccuped and lost timing. "You're using a demigod as a bag," Valeria said in my head, amused. "It volunteered," I thought back. The monster snapped. I was already elsewhere. Arc hook spiral took me around the horn. My elbow kissed the seam under it. The blade followed the kiss and made it matter. God flash. Singularity turned my next step into a pinprick that opened behind the thought of guard and came out under the plate. The basilisk's tail dropped like a verdict, trying to erase the road and everything on it. I didn't waste time pretending to block mountains. The wings of Eclipse wrote a quick edit. The tail passed through a place I would not be in for another half-breath, crushed stone impressively, and learned nothing. I let the gray see for me. Soul vision lit the beast in threads and knots. Currents of bad seen as strings strung to a rotten heart. Pillars of malice feeding the gaze. A cyst wrapped in scale inside the skull, pulsing with demigod power stolen and spoiled. "There you are," I thought. The basilisk inhaled and blinked. Its beam cut across the pass. Men ducked. Ian's domain flexed over the choir like a clear shell. The note held. Marcus pinned 3 anchors with a single thrust of spear unity. The fence steadied a fraction. "Thank you," I said to both without turning. Spectral sword split me into choices. Not illusions. Options. Whichever one the eye picked, the edge waited there. The ridge rang with the high note of cut horn. Pieces hit the road and turned to dust. Hollow eclipse, pure power, fell like a hammer where the wings handed me a nail. The blow drove the basilisk's head down a hand-width. Tried to heal wrong. The gray pages refused the premise. The wrong wouldn't stick. It hissed, and the hiss tried to become a command that made knees bend. Mythweaver's thread brushed my tongue. "Your gaze petrifies the helpless," I wrote lightly inside myself. "I am not that story." The command hit me as a polite suggestion and went nowhere. I remembered Rachel's white hands shaking over me, back when the second calamity wore a city like a coat. Bones cracked inside my chest while she poured everything she had into keeping me upright for one more step. Every breath tasted like iron. Every cut fought back. We won by inches and prayer and a price I carried for months. This wasn't that. I was not alone now either, but I was free. "Stellar cascade," I murmured. Shooting stars fell from the wrong angles. They came from pages that said the page was sky. Lances of light cut through miasma and stitched the basilisk's joints to pain. It tried to rise into them, found me instead. Valeria hummed as I shifted my grip. She shaped the edge just a little to please the cut I was about to make. "Marcus," I called, and tossed 2 fingers toward the left. "Pin." He understood. Spear Unity wrote a straight line that the basilisk's chin tripped over. For a breath the head dipped exactly the way I had asked. I slid under the horn and into the thin space behind the left eye. World's Edge is greedy. It wants to divide false from true until there's nothing left but a single answer. I fed it, but not too much. A ring of gray formed thin as a whisper. Inside this line, the cut will reach, I said to no one in particular, and brought Valeria down. The road did not split. The sky did not scream. The world learned something small and important. The ring passed, and the cyst inside the skull met the edge built to take it apart. The basilisk went still. Miasma stuttered, then tried to flood. Redeemer obelisks drank harder. Luna's pure light surged along the wall and turned black back to color wherever it could reach. Erebus's bone guns punched holes through him, cannons in tidy arcs. Wormbone lines crashed through bone gliders and left clean ruins. The basilisk's gaze twitched for me again. It was slower. It was tired. I set Valeria's tip to the stone once more. Pond of Tranquility answered. The beam turned to rain that forgot how to be rain. It reared, finally angry. The tail rose to make an example of the iron line. I folded one page and stepped from road to ridge with no air between. God Flash put me on its spine. CQC made me a knife inside a throat the size of a house. 1-inch punch into the spine. Bones bigger than siege timbers hummed and then didn't. Flicker palm turned a block into a slap that moved ahead a meter to the right at exactly the wrong time for it. Ground reversal stomp into the base of the skull, using its lift to flip its own weight against its own plates. 0-inch again because kindness is quick. Came down, shaking the pass. The fence bowed and came back angry. The choir's notes swelled like the sound a mother makes when a fever breaks. I flipped the page once more and faced the basilisk's ruined eye. Sleep, I said, and cut. World's Edge didn't need the whole ring this time. A thin slice through the core. Gray petals drifted from nowhere and landed on what fell out. They hid nothing and told the road the story was finished. Silence rolled from ridge to sluice. Then sound returned in the shape of men breathing. Someone laughing too high and then choking on it. Boots on stone. A warder sobbing into her neighbor's shoulder while still holding the note because she didn't know how to stop yet. I exhaled. Valeria cooled against my hand, pleased with herself. Master, remaining threats at Iron Vale and Blue Sluice are below nuisance. Erebus reported in my mind, dry as bone. Redeemers request permission to sanctify the kill zone to prevent relapse. Granted, I thought. Work with the ward engineers. No spooking, no overreach. Luna landed at my side, pure light still burning around her fingers. She looked up at the carcass, the part of it that hadn't already turned to dust and harmless stone, and then at me. You took your time, she said, trying not to smile and failing. I had to make it pretty, I said. Her hand touched my wrist, quick and warm, and then she was gone again, sprinting toward a stretcher line where a rider with a broken leg was trying to stand on it. Ian hovered above the choir, wings beating slow, face pale under soot. He caught my eye and saluted, small, professional, grateful. His domain didn't drop until the last warder unclenched her hands and the conductor gave the signal to rest. Marcus lowered his spear. The scales along his jaw retracted. He took one steadying breath and nodded once at the basilisk's ruin, once at Zaldrus's halves, and once at me. Thank you, he said simply. I rolled my shoulders. The wings of Eclipse flexed, pages smoothing. Gray petals still fell here and there in lazy loops until the air remembered itself and stopped giving them reasons to exist. Third calamity down, I said. Let's clean up. I looked at the ridge where the world had torn and felt for anything that still wanted to come through. The seam was closing, sulking. Good. Erebus. Keep lanes open for medevac until the ward houses hand you off. Valeria. Run a check on etherite fatigue along this sector. Already started. Valeria purred. Several posts want a nap. We'll give them one, I said. I glanced at Luna one more time. She was smiling at a childlike private who had just realized he still had all his fingers. The sight hit a part of me nothing else could reach. All right, I thought, and the gray agreed. I folded the pages, letting the wings settle. The crown above my brow dimmed to a quiet ring. The sword in my hand stayed hungry, but polite. The iron line breathed out as one. We had a lot left to do, but the worst thing here was already dead. Chapter 898. Third Calamity. 3. Ian hovered above the iron line with his domain still wrapped tight over the ward choir, watching the road settle after the impossible. The basilisk lay in pieces that had already started turning to harmless stone. The ridge it had crawled from was closing like a sulking mouth. The air was clearer with every breath, as if the world itself was relieved. He had seen power before. He was raised by it, trained under it, measured against it. But what Arthur had done didn't feel like power in the usual way. Felt like a decision, as if the world had tried to say no and Arthur had calmly crossed it out. Ian let his domain contract and finally pulled it back. The choir's note faded into soft voices and shaky laughter. He tilted his drake and dropped to the road, boots hitting stone near Marcus and the ruined halves of Zaldris Dreadfong. His father looked as he always did after something terrible. Steady first, tired second. Scales retracted along Marcus's jaw as his dragon blood calmed, and spear unity rested light in his hands, the way a promise rests when kept. Beyond them, the undead did not stop moving. Erebus's necropolis gates stood open along the inner road like clean wounds that refused to bleed. Regiments of bone marched with machine rhythm, shields up, helmets down, flanking living soldiers as if they had drilled together for years. Redeemers of ash planted more obelisks that burned steady, drinking any miasma that dared hang around. Bone cataphracts patrolled the gaps in the fence as if they had always belonged on the iron line. Ian had flinched when those gates blossomed. Half the southern army had. But then the undead picked their targets with perfect sense. The way they formed around the choir had been almost protective. It was hard to argue with reinforcements that stabilized the net and cleared the kill zone while asking nothing in return. Luna flashed past him in a streak of warm light. Her hair caught the wind like amethyst silk, her golden eyes scanning fast. Pure light poured from her hands in clean sheets. Gray fatigue lines vanished from warders' faces as she touched their shoulders. A kid with a broken leg stopped trying to stand because she told him gently not to. He smiled at her while obeying at once. Ian almost laughed. Only a saint could produce that reaction in this place. Arthur slid Valeria into a relaxed guard and looked up at the ridge again, just to make sure. The ring of gray above his brow dimmed to a soft halo. The wings at his back, those impossible, flat pages, folded down and vanished without needing to show off. For a man who had just used a demigod as a punching bag, he didn't look like he wanted worship. He looked like he wanted to make sure no one else would be hurt today. Ian walked forward. Marcus stepped beside him. Lyralii arrived a moment later in a sweep of quiet speed. Auburn hair pinned back, the faint tiger striping at her temples visible now that her Nyx's blood had settled. Her eyes tracked the field like a queen counting lives and debts. "Arthur Nightingale," Marcus said. "You have our thanks." Arthur's answer was simple. "I did what needed doing." Lyralii bowed her head, formal even with dust on her cheek. "On behalf of the southern continent and its ruling house, thank you for saving our people and our border. We will not forget this." Arthur met her eyes, then Marcus's, then Ian's. "You held when it counted. That saved more people than my cut did." Ian knew humility when he heard it. He also knew truth. The line had held because people had refused to break. But the basilisk had died because one person decided it would. He kept his voice even. "I watched you fight," he said. "I won't pretend I understood all of it. But I understood enough. That wasn't a duel. That was you taking apart a problem." Arthur's smile was brief. "That's how calamities should be treated." The word landed hard. Ian heard it everywhere now. In the ring of empty helmets, in the scrape of stretchers, in the tight laughter of soldiers who had just found out they would live until sunset. Calamity, a word that used to mean the end of a chapter. After today it felt smaller, as if the definition had been changed without asking. He remembered what the basilisk's presence had done to the world a few minutes earlier. The The sky had lost color. Metal had dulled. His domain had bent under pressure mid-attack, and he had made an ugly choice to ground his Drake because he couldn't afford to lose a wing in the beam. That was calamity, the weight that turns talent into silence. Arthur had stepped into that weight and moved like a man pushing through a curtain. Ian replayed a few moments in his head. The way the gray pages had folded space so a step became two steps that touched. The brief ring of calm when the pond of tranquility turned the basilisk's breath into rain that forgot itself. The ugly, efficient knuckles and heel that broke a neck the size of a hall beam as if the body were a logic problem with 4 simple steps. The little smile before the final cut. None of it was flashy for its own sake. It was all clean choices. He realized he was smiling too, not because he liked being outclassed, but because the world had just gotten a small piece safer and more understandable. There was a way to stand against things that told you to kneel. Arthur had proved it by doing it with a sort of ruthless kindness. Fast, neat, no suffering left in the cut. A chime sounded from Ian's wristband. Palace net coming back to full capacity. Reports flooded in, Ironvale secure, Blue Sluice secure, 3 lesser breaches collapsing. Medevac lanes held by Redeemers and Southern paramedics. Ossuary gun crews sinking with Etherite lattice for residue sweeps. The line commander on Channel 2 said thank you 5 times in a row and then remembered protocol and said it a 6th time more correctly. Erebus approached, quiet for a tall figure in grave robes, a crown of bones sitting on a skull that somehow managed to look thoughtful. He bowed in the old style to Marcus and Lyrelii, then to Arthur, deep enough to show respect without pretending to be a courtier. Sanctification complete along the primary road. The Lich King reported. Residual corruption below nuisance thresholds. Redeemers will remain for 8 hours to ensure compliance. Thank you, Lord Erebus, Lyrelii said, formal but sincere. Your forces saved lives. The skull inclined slightly. We exist to be useful. Ian wondered how many times in history a queen had thanked a Lich King for medical logistics on a live border. The world kept getting stranger. It was also getting better. Chapter 899. Third Calamity. 4. Media drones finally dared to drift closer, their lenses blinking red, green, blue. One caught Arthur's profile against the dulling stone of the basilisk skull. Another panned across the ward choir, catching tired smiles and the conductor pinching the bridge of her nose with shaking fingers. If the footage went out today, it would change more than morale. Ian pictured what would happen when the rest of the world saw a man walk into a calamity and end it without bleeding out in someone's arms. He pictured doctrine meetings in Valdris. He pictured the other continents updating terms that had been carved in cold fear for a century. Calamity as a category had been a ceiling. After today, it might become a task. Marcus seemed to be thinking along the same lines. He turned to Arthur again. This will unsettle the world. It needs unsettling, Arthur said. Calamity is not a rank. It's a situation. Treat it like one and it stops owning your language. Lyrelii's mouth curved, not quite a smile. You speak like someone who has seen the worst version of that word. I have, Arthur said simply. And I won't see it again. Ian had heard rumors about the second calamity and Avalon. He had seen the after-action reports that weren't meant for him. He knew Rachel had stood over Arthur for hours, pouring herself empty to keep him moving long enough to win. The man standing on the iron line now wasn't the boy in those reports. Mid-Radiant rank had given him reach and control that changed the conversation. The gray wrapped around him like it had always been waiting for this. He took a breath and gave voice to what many of them were thinking. For the record, he said, straight-backed despite the ache setting into his shoulders. On behalf of the southern continent, the Vizirian family, and our allied houses, I offer formal thanks to the second hero for today. You saved thousands of lives in an hour. We will honor that. Arthur didn't look comfortable with titles, but he didn't reject the moment. He inclined his head. Then let's save more by finishing the job. He turned a little, listening to 2 voices at once. Ian followed his gaze and spotted Valeria's subtle shimmer along his gauntlet and Luna's flick of attention from a brace fitting 3 tenths away. Arthur's expression softened at the sight of Luna coaxing a stubborn private back onto his stretcher with one raised eyebrow and a stern whisper. Erebus will coordinate with your ward engineers, Arthur added. We'll leave the Redeemers and Obelisks where you want them for the day. Valeria has a list of Etherite posts that need rest or replacement. We'll cover the gaps until your crews swap them. Marcus nodded. Accepted. We'll double the teams. And I'll tighten patrols on the western slope, Lyralii said. If there's another seam, I want to find it before it opens. Ian looked up at the ridge one last time. The tear was a scar now, not a wound. In some places the stone glittered faintly, as if grateful. He flexed his hands, felt the tired tremor in his fingers, and finally allowed his body to admit it had been afraid. He had felt the basilisk's pressure and thought, so this is what a demigod feels like. He had braced for the long grind. Steady losses, careful exchanges, hanging on until a better answer arrived. Arthur had been the better answer. Not loud, not cruel, just precise. Ian would be radiant soon. He could feel the seam thin under his feet, the threshold close. Watching Arthur set the bar didn't discourage him. It set direction. Domains could be more than armor. Unity could be more than edge. If he wanted a world where calamity was a task, he'd have to help make it. A runner jogged up, saluted, and addressed Lyralii and Marcus both. Palace line is stabilized, Your Majesties. Council requests a live brief in 15. Media wants a statement. Lyralii's eyes flicked to the cameras and back. They can have a sentence now. She took one step forward. Queen again, voice steady enough to carry without aid. The southern continent is secure, she said, not shouting. Our people stood firm. Our allies stood with us. The iron line holds. The words rippled down the road and up into the ridges. People stopped what they were doing, listened, and straightened. She turned back to Arthur. Will you come to Valdris after we secure the sector? There are matters we should discuss in quiet. Once the wounded are clear, he said, we'll follow. Ian caught his eye and found humor there, faint and tired and real. He returned it. Next time, Ian said, give me a head start so I can pretend I helped. You did, Arthur said. The choir is still singing because you didn't make this about you. Ian didn't argue. He'd hold that line close later when the adrenaline dipped and sleep wouldn't come. He looked down the road where soldiers were already coiling cable, resetting anchors, and painting fresh marks on stones that had just remembered what they were for. The undead moved among them like careful ghosts, taking orders from living officers without friction. Redeemers prayed in low voices that sounded more like math than faith. A small gust kicked dust across Arthur's boots. He tapped his heel once, testing the feel of the ground, as if asking the world if it was done for today. It answered by staying still. Ian knew what came next. Reports, repairs, the long work that didn't make headlines. He also knew what had just happened would change more than schedules. A calamity had been rewritten in an afternoon. The word would survive because people like big words, but the fear glued to it had lost a layer of bite. Someday, when another ridge split open on another continent, someone would pull up today's footage, point at the man with black hair and a gray crown and say, it can be done. Even better, they'd say, here is how. Fence, choir, calm, pin, cut. The world had been deciding for a long time that calamities were true disaster. Today, the world had been corrected. Chapter 900, The Dragonheart Seal. The iron line breathed again. Erebus had already faded back into the cool places between things, his gates closing one by one with neat finality. Valeria slipped into my shadow with a last cool brush along my wrist, satisfied with the state of the fence. Only Luna stayed, pure light still glowing at her fingertips as she moved from stretcher to stretcher, checking bandages, easing pain, scolding anyone who tried to stand too soon. I took another slow look at the field. The ward choir sat on their stools, shaking and smiling, the conductor with her head in her hands as laughter and tears tangled. The fence anchors were set. Cracked posts already had replacement tags. Redeemers of Ash tended their obelisks and handed tea to anyone who would take it. Southern medics moved in practiced lines. The basilisk's corpse was turning to harmless stone, the worst of its miasma trapped and burning out. Good, I thought. Hold on to this picture. Air pressure shifted. Heads turned as a shape crossed the sun. Tiamat arrived as shadow first, then wing, then woman. She landed lightly on the road in human form. Midnight black hair, crimson eyes, simple dark silk that made armor seem like a costume. But the ground still understood who had touched it. Soldiers straightened without being told. Every Viserion guard within sight went to one knee. Ian and Marcus bowed. Lyraliai's nod was small and deep, queen to guardian. Tiamat's gaze swept the road once, marking damage and strength with the quick precision of someone who has counted more battlefields than years on most calendars. Her eyes found me. A brief smile touched her mouth. As expected, she said. You handled it cleanly. Everyone else held, I answered. I just took the hinge off the door. Her attention flicked to the folded space where the portal had been, then to my back where the gray wings weren't showing anymore. Your controls improved. The pages turned smoother now. Mid-radiant helps, I said. And the practice. She looked past me.
Luna.
Luna lifted her head, eyes bright. Great guardian. Tiamat's expression softened in that way that always made Luna look both younger and older. Good work, she said. You held the line that mattered. Luna pretended not to glow at the praise and went back to scolding a rider for trying to hop on one leg. Marcus stepped forward then, spear grounded. Lyraliai took his side. Ian stood just behind, soot still on his face, posture formal. Arthur Nightingale, Lyraliai said, and even her voice seemed to stand straighter. On behalf of the southern continent, the House of Viserion, and the allied beast bloodline families, we offer our formal thanks. Thank you, Marcus added, simple and solid. I inclined my head. I'm glad I got here in time. You did more than that, Ian said. You changed how this line breathes. A hush settled around us as more officers and family envoys arrived and formed a loose half-circle. Nyx tigers at Lyraliai's shoulder, viper sappers in dark green, storm griffin riders with helmets under their arms, several elder matriarchs from the water choirs with dragon rings on their hands. Media drones hung back, lenses blinking, letting the moment be what it needed. Lyraliai lifted a small case. Inside lay a medal, dark gold on a black ribbon, a dragon's heart stylized as a seal. The dragon heart seal, she said. Our highest honor. She stepped close and pinned it to the upper edge of my cuirass. Her fingers were steady and careful, as if affixing the medal to any other surface would somehow miss the point. Marcus placed his palm briefly over hers, then let go. Ian saluted, a clean line of hand to brow. Tiamat watched without interrupting, approval quiet in her eyes. The queen continued, voice clear enough for every drone and every soldier to catch. We also grant the following. Full tax exemption on southern trade lanes for your guild Ouroboros. Permanent priority clearance in our air corridors. One allotment of dragon steel and one of etherite from crown stores for your use against future threats. And open access to southern medical and logistics nets during declared emergencies. Useful gifts, not just ceremony. I appreciated that. Thank you, I said. We'll use them well. Use them quickly, Tiamat murmured. Just for me. The world isn't slowing down. I nodded once. Lyraliai took a breath, then looked past the row of officers to the soldiers clustered along the fence. You have all heard the stories of the first hero, she said. Today, the second hero has done what was said to be impossible, ending a calamity without loss of the line. As of this hour, by decree of the Southern Council, Arthur Nightingale is recognized as the greatest hero of our age. A ripple moved through the gathered ranks. Surprise, pride, relief. Someone started clapping and stopped, unsure. Then the choir matriarch who had held the last note too long put her hands together twice. Firm. The sound caught. The road filled with it. I stood and let the noise pass through me. Liam Kagu's face flashed in my mind, half smile. Tired eyes. The memory of a man who burned himself to buy everyone else one more day. I respect you, I thought, not sure who I was talking to, only sure it needed to be said. I'm not trying to win a scoreboard. I'm trying to end the board. When the clapping faded, Ian stepped close enough that only those nearest would hear. For what it's worth, he said, quiet and honest, I don't think they're wrong. I don't need them to be right, I said. I need them to be ready. He smiled, small and sharp. They will be. Tiamat's gaze slid to the metal at my chest, then to Luna's moving shape, then back to my eyes. Enjoy 2 breaths of this, she said. Then breathe work again. I plan to. A short procession followed, short because the day didn't have room for anything else. Family heads stepped forward to say their piece. An elder from the Viper line promising engineers to rebuild posts. A Storm Griffin captain offering training time with their riders. The Nyx Tigers pledging border scouts for the next 6 months. The words were formal, but the eyes were personal. People meant them. There were also practical signatures. PalaceNet documents surfaced on wristbands, and I signed where necessary. Erebus reappeared just long enough to accept a temporary license for Redeemers to operate alongside Southern Medics under the Crown's authority. He bowed to Lyralii and Marcus and vanished again before any cameras decided to make a story about a Lich King and a Queen discussing hospital policy. Luna found her way back to my side when the last stretcher rolled. She slipped her hand into mine, squeezing once. You did well, she said. So did you. She tilted her chin at the metal. Heavy. Not compared to the last hour. She made a face that almost counted as a smile. Don't get arrogant. I'm not. I'm happy the word calamity lost some teeth today. We stood like that for a minute. The smell of stone dust and hot metal lifted. The light shifted warmer as afternoon moved on. Tiamat broke the pause. Valdris will want you for a debrief, she said. Come once the sector is clean. We'll follow after handoff. Her eyes flicked past me to Marcus and Lyralii. See to your people. I will run the ridge check myself. You shouldn't, Marcus began, then stopped at her look and nodded. Thank you. She rose without changing shape, a single strong jump and a measure of will, and was gone, a dark streak against the sky. Lyralii turned back to me. There's a balcony in Valdris where the wind is kind, she said. We'll meet you there when this is done. Understood. The crowd thinned as work reclaimed everyone. Ian stayed long enough to clap my shoulder and promise a drink I would probably refuse. Marcus offered his hand, old warrior to young, and I took it. Lyralii gave Luna a small, sincere smile that made the Chelan look like she might cry for half a heartbeat. Before she remembered, she did not do that in public. When it was just the 3 of us again, me, Luna, the road, she leaned into my side. You're being called the greatest, she said, voice low. It's a knife if I hold it wrong, I said. I'll use it to open doors. Her eyes warmed. Good. I looked up at the ridge one more time. The tear was a line now, already blending back into the slope. A place that had tried to be a mouth and failed. Calamity is a situation, not a crown, I thought. We'll make that sentence real. Valeria murmured in the back of my skull. The way she does when she's pleased with the numbers. Etherite fatigue map posted. 3 posts need replacement. 5 need rest. 1 wants praise. Tell it a story about sturdy trees, I answered. Already did. Erebus sent a last dry note. Redeemers will complete sanctification in 6 hours. The living are arresting my lanterns to take pictures with them. Let them, I said. They did good. I squeezed Luna's hand and let my shoulders loosen for the first time since the scream under the ridge. The gray crown above my brow dimmed to a quiet ring. The wings of eclipse rested, ready for the next page. Let's get to Valdris, I said. After you drink water, Luna said. And eat something. Mothering me? Always. I smiled and let her win that one. We walked the line once more, speaking with warders, thanking crews, giving small orders where they helped. Soldiers nodded. Some tried to salute and forgot midway and waved instead. I waved back. Felt right. By the time we lifted for the palace, the iron line looked like itself again. Scarred, stubborn, alive. Drones followed us at a polite distance. Somewhere ahead, A balcony waited. So did more problems. That was fine. We weren't the same people who had faced the second calamity. We didn't need to be. Today, a continent changed what it believed a calamity was. Tomorrow, we'd change more.